Close your eyes. Forget everything you know about Earth. No cities, no oceans teeming with whales, no flowers, grass or birdsong, not even the buzz of a mosquito. The Earth you're lying on, the one beneath your bed, beneath your home, is unimaginably older than anything you can picture, and once it almost ended. Roughly 252 million years ago, the world stood at the edge of absolute silence. Volcanoes the size of countries had spent centuries vomiting fire across the land, unleashing Siberian traps, giant fissures that spewed lava and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere like open wounds. The skies turned black with ash, oceans lost their oxygen, acid rain fell, methane bubbled from seafloors, life simply stopped. An extinction event so complete that even the insects, the eternal survivors, nearly vanished. And yet, through the smoke, through the ash-choked winds, through the poisoned seas, something lingered. Tiny reptiles, hardy amphibians, unkillable mosses and spores, bacteria hidden in boiling springs. Not much, but enough. Enough to begin again. This is where the Mesozoic era begins. Not with a bang, but with a breath. The Earth, still scorched, still aching, begins to stir. It's like watching a patient in recovery, body trembling as it relearns how to move, to grow, to live. Slowly, the ecosystem knits itself back together. Forests return, not as lush jungles, but as sparse, rugged groves of conifers, cycads and ginkgos, plants that can take the heat. Plants with no flowers, no fruits, just cones, spines and resilience. You wouldn't call it pretty, you'd call it determined. Above these early forests stretch dry, red skies, heavy with carbon. The world is warmer than you can imagine. There are no ice caps, no polar bears, no seasons as we think of them, just heat and time. The continents are fused into one single, unbroken giant, Pangaea, a vast supercontinent so massive that weather systems struggle to reach its core. Rain falls at the edges, near the coasts, but the center, barren, a desert the size of a continent. Sand dunes stretch from horizon to horizon, winds scream across sun-baked plateaus, and yet, even here, life claws its way back. Scurrying between rocks are small, agile reptiles. Some are no bigger than a rat. Others, already, are thinking bigger. One of them, slim and fast, walks on two legs. Its name, at least what we call it now, is Dinosaurus. It's not yet the dinosaurs you know, but it's a start. Meanwhile, under the ground, tiny mammals, barely bigger than mice, dig tunnels and nibble on whatever they can find. They are warm-blooded, covered in fuzz, and perpetually afraid. And with good reason. The world is ruled by reptiles now, and not just any reptiles. Archosaurs. Imagine the evolutionary blueprint of crocodiles and dinosaurs before they split. These were their ancestors, upright, fierce, evolving faster than anything else. They come in all shapes, armored, toothy, horned, and winged, and they were fast, surprisingly fast. In this new world, speed and adaptability were everything. And so dinosaurs begin to appear, not with trumpets, not as titans, but as clever, wiry opportunists. They weren't the kings yet, but they were rising, slowly, quietly, patiently. The Triassic period, the first chapter of the Mesozoic, is strange, half wasteland, half experiment lab. Life tries new things, makes mistakes, starts over. Entire groups evolve, flourish, and vanish again in the span of a few million years. It's a chaotic nursery for a new world. Every form of predator and prey is being auditioned for the roles of future giants. In the oceans, things are no less bizarre. You sink beneath the surface and enter an alien world. Forget whales and tuna. These waters are patrolled by ichthyosaurs, marine reptiles that look like a Frankenstein fusion of a shark, a dolphin, and a crocodile. Sleek, fast, with eyes the size of dinner plates. Some grow up to 50 feet long. Alongside them glide nottosaurs and the first plesiosaurs, long-necked creatures with flippers like snakes attached to turtle bodies. They hunt slow fish and chase ammonites, those coiled-shelled mollusks that flash like jewelry across the seafloor. The seas are coming alive again. And above the land, something flaps, not a bird, not yet, but a pterosaur, the first flying vertebrate. Its wings are made of skin stretched tight across elongated fingers. It rides warm air currents rising off the rocks, its shadow flickering over sun-bleached cliffs. You lie on your back in this ancient world, staring at the red sky, and for a moment it doesn't feel like Earth. It feels like a dream, a slow, surreal rebirth, a planet writing itself back into motion. But dreams don't last forever. Because just as life was getting the hang of things again, Earth had another twist in store. A second extinction. Not as bad as the last, but bad enough to shake the evolutionary tree. Volcanic activity again, climate shocks, species vanished, niches opened, and into that void, the dinosaurs stepped forward. The Triassic ends, and the Jurassic begins. Now the world blooms. Rain returns. The supercontinent begins to split. Tectonic plates shift, and new oceans form. The climate becomes wetter, more stable. Forests spread, river valleys open, and the dinosaurs, those once minor players, become the stars of the show. No longer small and scrappy, they grow, and grow, and grow. The first sauropods lumber across fern plains like living fortresses. Apatosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Camarasaurus. These are names we know, but in the Jurassic they're just life forms doing what they do best, eating, growing, and reshaping the landscape with every thunderous step. They stretch over 80 feet long, their necks lifting high into conifer canopies. Their legs are like tree trunks. Their skin is leathery, earth-toned, dappled in sun and shadow, and they move with a kind of slow, deliberate grace, immense but peaceful. Where there are giants, there must be hunters. And so, theropods evolve. The most famous of them in the Jurassic, Allosaurus, smaller than T-Rex, but older, smarter. Built like a skeletal weapon, with jaws that could dislocate and arms tipped with talons. It hunted the big ones, and the small ones, and probably each other. But even it wasn't the top of the evolutionary food chain. Not forever. Because something else was beginning to stir. Something smaller, faster, covered in proto-feathers. A predator with keen eyesight, agile feet, and perhaps even the first glimmer of a chirp. Birds, the first real ones, evolving out of small theropod dinosaurs. Not a separate class of animal, not some new miracle, just another branch on the dinosaur family tree, one that would survive the end. But that's millions of years away. For now, the Jurassic unfolds like a masterpiece. Volcanoes still rumble in the distance, but the skies are mostly clear, air rich in oxygen, forests thick with ferns and moss. Giant dragonflies buzz lazily through warm breezes. Herds of stegosaurs with their arched backs and plated spines graze under towering trees, while herds of ornithopods leap away at the faintest sign of movement. Rivers flow slower, lakes steam under the sun, and on every continent life explodes in color, scale, and sound. It's peaceful in a way, monumental, like Earth is finally remembering how to breathe deeply again. And through all this, the continents drift. Pangaea is breaking apart into two massive chunks, Laurasia in the north, Gondwana in the south, each with its own climates, its own ecosystems, its own evolutionary detours. Species become isolated, different, bizarre. And Earth loves bizarre. Everywhere you look, nature is experimenting, not cautiously, gleefully. A stegosaur with tail spikes like swords, a pterosaur with a head bigger than its body, a fish with armor plating, plants that shoot spores in clouds, fungi taller than men, insects with colors that haven't existed since. You walk through this world slowly, your feet brushing against leaves the size of manhole covers. The air is warm, rich, and filled with distant calls, unearthly cries echoing through misty valleys. And above you, something flies. Not a machine, not a bird, but a memory. A memory of Earth as it once was, in the greatest age of monsters and miracles. And the story is just getting started. The Earth is changing. Beneath your feet, tectonic plates creak like ancient ships drifting apart, slowly cracking the once mighty Pangaea into new, unfamiliar pieces. The map is redrawing itself, slowly, imperceptibly. What looks like land now will one day become ocean floor. What was once one world is fragmenting, creating new coastlines, new climates, new isolation. And with every crack in the land comes opportunity. The Jurassic continues, but its innocence is beginning to fade. In the north, the forests grow deeper. In the south, the deserts return. Rivers snake through freshly formed valleys. Mountains, young and jagged, push upward like the bones of the earth breaking the surface. The air is still hot, still heavy, but something's different now. Because now, life is watching the sky. In the middle of a warm Jurassic day, the light begins to dim. Not like sunset, not like a passing cloud. It's slower, more deliberate, as though some great invisible hand is drawing a curtain across the heavens. The wind dies. The chirps, clicks and rustles of the forest fall silent. Even the massive sauropods, those peaceful towers of flesh and bone, pause mid-step, staring upward with black ancient eyes. And then, eclipse, a total one. The moon, new and closer than it is today, slides in front of the sun like a god blotting itself out. The forest is bathed in deep twilight. Shadows stretch and twist. Ferns curl inward. Pterosaurs freeze in the sky, unsure whether to land or soar. It lasts only minutes. But those minutes stretch across time like ripples in a pond. And when the light returns, nothing is quite the same. Eclipses are rare, but in the Mesozoic, they are sacred. Not to people. There are no humans here yet, but to nature itself. Every animal seems to know, instinctively, that the moment means something. They act differently afterward. They roam, they flee, they migrate, they mate. As if, in that sudden darkness, something ancient was whispered to them. Some celestial message only the oldest blood remembers. In the warm aftermath, a herd of Camarasaurus moves across a clearing, long necks swaying in rhythm like grass in wind. Their feet leave prints in soft clay, prints that will fossilize one day for paleontologists to find. Every step is both a presence and a prophecy, because the world they walk is already in flux. Above them, flying reptiles, Rhamphorhynchus, with long tails tipped in diamond-shaped rudders, dive for fish in ancient lakes. Their wings whistle in the air like paper kites. They chirp and bicker, nest in cliffs, feed their young. They have no feathers, not yet, just leathery skin stretched between bone and claw. But far away, deep in the trees, a new shape stirs. Feathered, light, curious. You wouldn't think it much. The size of a chicken, maybe. But its eyes are sharp, its tail is stiffened for balance, and its arms, yes, arms are evolving into wings, true wings. This is Archaeopteryx, and it's not quite a dinosaur, not quite a bird. It's a whisper of what's coming. The first bird is not a trumpet blast, it is a question mark, a fluke perhaps, but a fluke with feathers. That alone is revolutionary. Feathers weren't invented for flight. They came earlier, as insulation, decoration, camouflage, and only later, by accident or brilliance, did they catch the air. This is the Jurassic's great secret. Its monsters weren't just brutal, they were beautiful. Many of the smaller theropods now sport filament-like feathers, tufts along their arms, downy fuzz along their backs. Some may have been striped, others spotted, some possibly bore iridescent sheens, like hummingbirds or starlings. No one knows for sure, but one thing is certain, they were far from drab. The old image of scales and green-grey lizard skin? Outdated. These creatures were vivid, expressive, dynamic. And they weren't alone. The Jurassic seas are now a kaleidoscope of motion. Coral reefs, ancient and unfamiliar, bristle with primitive life. Crinoids sway with the currents. Trilobites are long gone, but ammonites still spiral and shimmer like underwater galaxies. And hunting above them? A new wave of oceanic titans. Pliosaurs, relatives of plesiosaurs, have taken the throne. One in particular, Leopleurodon, can grow up to 30 feet long. Its bite rivals that of a T-Rex. Its flippers propel it through the water with terrifying speed. Its eyes are massive, built for spotting prey, even in the darkest depths. It hunts by stealth, by silence. You swim in that water and you feel nothing. Then suddenly, everything. A shift in pressure, A flicker of light. Then nothing. Ever again. Back on land, the herbivores grow stranger. Stegosaurs with their odd double row of plates and swinging tail spikes become iconic, but they are misunderstood. Their brains? Tiny, but their bodies? Brilliantly engineered. The plates might help regulate body temperature, or serve as visual signals, or perhaps both. The tail spikes, called thagomisers, humorously could impale predators with ease. And predators are everywhere. Ceratosaurus, Torvosaurus, and of course Allosaurus. Allosaurus is the apex of its time. Not the biggest, but perhaps the boldest. A versatile killer. It could take down sauropods working in loose packs, or snap up smaller prey alone. It had sharp curved teeth, ideal for slicing. Its skull was lighter than it looked. Its eyes faced forward, and that meant depth perception. That meant intelligence. In a silent Jurassic forest, a lone Allosaurus lowers its snout to a stream. It drinks, then raises its head. There on the horizon, another eclipse begins. Not full, just partial, but enough to cast golden crescents through the leaves. The dinosaur stares unblinking, almost reverent. These shadow moments echo through time like drum beats. They mark chapters in Earth's deep memory. Each eclipse is a pause, a punctuation mark in the story of life, a soft breath before the next act. And act it will. Because the Jurassic, for all its wonder, is not the end. It is the middle. The canvas is still being painted. The characters are still auditioning. The drama is only beginning to build. The continents drift further apart. Laurasia moves north, Gondwana slides south. Between them, the Atlantic yawns open wider. Climate zones sharpen. Rainforests expand in some areas, while deserts bloom in others. Isolated species diverge. And deep underground, pressure builds. Because the Earth remembers what it did before. And it will do it again. Volcanoes rumble, seas rise, temperatures spike, ocean currents change, ecosystems shift. And just as the Jurassic begins to settle into its rhythm, the Cretaceous knocks at the door. But not just yet. The sun is rising again. The eclipse is over. A flock of primitive birds takes to the sky, feathers glowing gold. Below, a herd of herbivores trudge through dew-covered ferns, their footprints vanishing behind them. Everything is moving, evolving, becoming. The Jurassic fades, not with fire, not with ice, but with a slow exhale. Earth is calm now. The air is humid and full of breath. Forests stretch for hundreds of miles, thick with conifers, ferns, horsetails, and moss. Every leaf drips with condensation. Every branch bends under its own weight, the weight of time and silence. There's no grass yet, no flowers, no fruit. Only green. Endless, ancient green. You walk through this primeval world, and you are small. The trees above you are not quite the trees you know. They're older, stranger. Some look like distant cousins of redwoods, others like alien umbrellas with scales instead of bark. Thick trunks twist skyward like sleeping titans frozen mid-rise. And across this lush world, the reign of the dinosaurs continues. It's not loud. It's not a thunderous domination. It's balance. Huge sauropods move in herds. Apatosaurus, Brontosaurus, Diplodocus. Their footsteps sink deep into the mud, leaving craters that fill with rainwater. Dragonflies skim their surfaces, oblivious to the shadows above. The great herbivores graze like living excavators, stripping entire forests, yet somehow never running out of food, because the earth is abundant now, stable, moist, teeming with life in every direction. Predators, Allosaurus, Megalosaurus, Ceratosaurus, watch from the shadows, cautious, patient, clever. They do not hunt for sport. They do not charge in wildly. They wait. They stalk. They learn the rhythms of the herds, the patterns of movement, the weaknesses. These aren't monsters. They're animals. And this is their world. Above it all, the sky is full of wings. Pterosaurs with wingspans from inches to over 30 feet. Coast on thermals that rise from jungle floors. Some nest in cliffs. Others fish in lakes. One species, Dimorphodon, has a short, blunt skull and a mouth full of uneven teeth. Another, Pterodostro, filters food from water with bristle-like teeth, like a flamingo with bat wings. They are not birds, but they fly, and that is enough. And in their shadows, real birds begin to emerge. Small, feathered, intelligent. Descendants of the theropod dinosaurs, agile climbers, quick runners, gliders that jump from branch to branch with outstretched arms tipped in feathers. Their eyes are bright, their bones are light. Their minds are changing. Somewhere in the underbrush, a creature makes a choice, not to hide, not to freeze, but to leap. And in that leap is the future. But the future can wait, because right now the Earth is at peace. The Jurassic is the great green pause before the next explosion of colour, before flowers, before bees, before the rise of Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops. The Earth is breathing deeply. But even in this calm, something stirs. Underground, the plates of the planet grind slowly, silently. The continents are drifting apart. Laurasia moving north, Gondwana sliding south. The Atlantic is widening, inch by inch. Each inch opens new seas, creates new coasts, new rainfalls, new islands, new extinction zones. The Earth is not angry. It is merely shifting. And life adapts. It always does. The forests become denser. Rain grows more regular. The air thickens with oxygen and scent. The musty perfume of rotting wood, wet moss, dinosaur sweat, and the exhalations of billions of ferns. Every breath is ancient. Every breeze carries memory. And then, quietly, a change. At first it's subtle. New plants appear, ones with strange little buds. No cones, no needles, just delicate leaves, and eventually petals. The first flowering plants arrive. The beginning of what we now call angiosperms. They don't dominate, not yet, but they begin to spread slowly, defiantly, bright flashes of yellow, red and white in a world of green. And the insects notice. Beetles crawl across petals, pollen dusting their backs. Early wasps hover clumsily. Moths, huge ones, flutter under fern canopies. Soon, bees. Not yet the bees, you know, but early prototypes. Nature is experimenting again. The ecosystem is evolving not just for survival, but for attraction, for competition, for beauty. This is the quiet revolution. Not teeth, not claws, but colour. And above it all, the sky dims once more. Another eclipse, partial this time. The sun wears a crescent mask. The shadows twist, the birds hush, the wind leans in. And in that brief darkness, Earth seems to hold its breath. You stand in a world on the cusp of transformation, and the Cretaceous waits. It's coming. The final act. Not the end of dinosaurs, but their masterpiece. The world shifts again, and this time it blossoms. The Cretaceous period begins roughly 145 million years ago. It doesn't announce itself with fire or ice, just change, slow, deliberate, unrelenting. What was green becomes more colourful. What was familiar becomes strange. And the Earth, once quiet, starts humming a different tune. The continents continue to drift, no longer part of one giant landmass. They're scattering like puzzle pieces floating on molten seas. North America creeps west. Europe shatters into islands. South America peels off from Africa. And Australia drifts away like a forgotten sibling. Oceans stretch wider, deeper, currents form, tides shift, climates change. What was once a uniform world begins to splinter into microcosms. Each region becomes its own experiment. Isolation births diversity, and with it, a burst of new life. The forests are different now. Conifers still stand tall, but they're joined by early flowering plants. Not many, but enough. Little blossoms poke up between ferns. Vines creep up tree trunks. Bright petals open to greet the sun. For the first time in Earth's history, there's colour. Not just green, but real colour. Pinks, yellows, blues. And something notices. Insects evolve alongside the flowers, wings patterned like stained glass, legs dusted in pollen, antennae twitching with scent and signal. The first bees take to the air, clumsy, buzzing messengers of change. Pollination begins. It's a quiet revolution, one that will shape the future of every forest, every ecosystem, every fruit we'll one day eat. But here, it's just starting, a flicker in the undergrowth. The dinosaurs adapt. The herbivores grow larger, broader, more armored. Ankylosaurs now roam, walking tanks with clubbed tails and backs covered in bony plates. Hadrosaurs emerge with strange duck-billed faces and rows of hundreds of teeth, perfect for chewing tough vegetation. They move in massive herds, some likely migrating thousands of miles seasonally. And high on a ridge, something watches them, waiting. It's not Allosaurus anymore. The Jurassic titans are gone. This is a new age, and with it comes a new hunter. Tyrannosaurus. Not yet the full-grown T-Rex you're picturing, but its ancestors are here, slender, quick, and deadly. As the Cretaceous continues, they'll grow, becoming the apex of the apex. Not just brawn, but brains, keen senses, incredible bite force. Evolution doesn't repeat itself, it escalates. But the Cretaceous isn't just the age of killers. It's the age of innovation. In Asia, small raptors appear. Velociraptor, yes, but forget the movie version. The real ones were the size of turkeys, covered in feathers, with long sickle-shaped claws and incredible agility. They hunted in packs, they likely communicated, and they looked oddly familiar. Because birds didn't descend from dinosaurs. They are dinosaurs. A lineage that never broke, just shrank, refined, adapted. You see one now perched on a branch, half lizard, half sparrow, all teeth. It ruffles its feathers, chirps, then takes off into the thick morning air. Somewhere behind the trees, the light fades again, slowly, gently. An eclipse, the third this year. The sun is just a thin crescent now, casting slivered shadows across the jungle floor. The flowers fold, the insects still. Even the hadrosaurs pause in their migration. It's as if the planet knows a chapter is nearing its climax. And yet, not everything is peaceful. Volcanic activity ramps up again. Ash blankets regions for months at a time. The oceans, warmer than ever, begin to lose oxygen in parts, forming dead zones. Still, life persists, adapts, thrives. In the seas, marine reptiles grow to monstrous sizes. Mosasaurus rules now, up to 50 feet long, jaws packed with conical teeth, tail powering it through the Cretaceous oceans like a scaly missile. It eats everything: fish, squid, sharks, other mosasaurs, even birds that dive too deep. Above the water, Hesperornis, a flightless diving bird with teeth, hunts silently, slipping through kelp forests like a penguin with attitude. Pteranodons still soar, but they're not alone. Some of their relatives, Quetzalcoatlus for instance, walk the land on long limbs, as tall as giraffes, wings folded like ancient aircraft waiting to launch. It is a world that's massive, majestic, and increasingly complex. And through it all, the rhythm continues. Light, shadow, light again. Each eclipse a heartbeat in deep time. Each one a reminder that Earth is not static, not predictable, always turning, always circling, always changing. The Cretaceous is Earth at its most alive. And yet, just over the horizon, a rock is falling. Far above the Earth, farther than the clouds, higher than the tallest pterosaur could ever fly, something stirs. It is not alive. It does not think. It does not feel. But it moves. Through the vacuum of space, across the silent void, a mountain of rock tumbles toward Earth, an asteroid the size of a city, a silent bullet on a collision course with destiny. But the Earth below doesn't know yet. It's still dreaming. The Cretaceous carries on, unaware of the fate streaking toward it. Across what is now western North America, a vast inland sea stretches from the Arctic to the Gulf of Mexico, the Western Interior Seaway. It divides the continent in two, turning mountains into islands and plains into shores. Along its edge, duck-billed dinosaurs graze in tidal marshes. Ceratopsians, like Triceratops and its cousins, move in herds, horns glinting under the Cretaceous sun. Their world is vibrant, loud, alive, alive. The sky buzzes with insects, The forests pulse with color, the oceans swarm with plankton, fish, marine reptiles, giant squid and towering predators. The air is humid, heavy with scent and sound. Thunderstorms roll in daily from the inland sea, cracking the sky open like a drum. And through the clouds, another eclipse begins. But this one is different. It doesn't darken slowly. It doesn't pass. It doesn't fade. The light simply dies. Because this is not an eclipse. It's impact. Somewhere in what will become the Yucatan Peninsula, the asteroid slams into Earth with a force beyond imagination. In a single second, the rock vaporizes into plasma. The air ignites. The ground liquefies. A shockwave circles the planet in hours. Winds tear through forests at supersonic speed. Earthquakes ripple through continents. Tsunamis hundreds of feet high crash across coasts, swallowing entire ecosystems. And worse still, a rain of molten rock follows. Ejected debris falls back through the atmosphere, heating as it descends, turning the sky into an oven. For hours, even days, the planet burns. Nothing escapes untouched. The night that follows is darker than any before, a darkness that stretches for months. The sky is choked with ash, soot and sulfur. Sunlight struggles to pierce the gloom. Global temperatures drop. Photosynthesis grinds to a halt. Plants wither. Herbivores starve. Carnivores turn on each other. And the age of dinosaurs ends. Not immediately, not all at once. Some linger, some fight, some survive for weeks, months, even years. But the world they ruled is gone. And in the silence that follows, a different sound begins. Small feet pattering across leaf litter. A shadow with feathers pecking at seeds. Mammals. Tiny, warm-blooded, adaptable. They didn't conquer the dinosaurs. They simply waited. And now their time begins. But let's stay here in the ashes. Because even in this moment of extinction, there is wonder. The Earth is not destroyed. It is reborn. Again, just like after the Permian extinction, life finds cracks to grow in. Ferns return first, then insects, then frogs, then birds. Not all dinosaurs die out. One branch lives on. They shrink, they adapt, they sing. Every bird you've ever seen, every pigeon, hawk, parrot, penguin, is a dinosaur. Not metaphorically, literally. Feathers, beaks, nesting, flight, legacy. You watch as the first true bird, beaten but alive, lifts off from a scorched tree trunk. It flaps weakly, sails over blackened ground, and vanishes into the thickening mist. The Mesozoic has ended, but the Earth keeps spinning, and somewhere out there, another eclipse is already on its way. The skies have cleared. Not fully, not yet, but enough for the light to return. What rises over the horizon isn't just a sun, it's a second chance. The Earth is raw, scraped down to its bones. Charred forests, silent valleys, ash where ferns once flourished. Bones lie half buried in floodplains, twisted skeletons of once great creatures, the last Triceratops, the final T-Rex, their fossils still waiting to be made, still soft, still warm. But over time, they will harden. Pressure, minerals, millions of years. What we now call fossils. These were lives, once warm, once breathing, now echoes pressed into stone. The Mesozoic may be over, but it left its story behind, written not in ink, but in sediment. All across the globe, layers form a line of ash and iridium in the rock record. A signal, a scar. We call it the KPG boundary. Above it, mammals, birds, and flowering plants thrive. Below it, dinosaurs, ammonites, and marine reptiles reign. And right at the line, fire and silence. But the story doesn't end with extinction, because from the ruins of the Cretaceous a new Earth begins to grow. Still warm, still wild, but changed. The oceans refill with life, coral reefs rebuild, fish radiate into 1,000 new forms. On land, mammals grow bolder, bigger, not just nocturnal nibblers now, but explorers, climbers, runners, predators. But they are not the past. They are not the Mesozoic. That world is gone. And yet, we keep looking back. Because buried in stone cliffs and desert plateaus, in museum drawers and quarry walls, are glimpses of the lost age, the age of giants, of jungles before flowers, of birds that roared, of reptiles that ruled the sky. Fossils are not just bones. They're time travelers, each one a frozen moment, perfectly preserved, a claw mid-swipe, a footprint in volcanic ash, an egg that never hatched. We crack open geodes and find teeth like daggers. We chisel into shale and uncover feathers still etched in stone. In some amber we find trapped midges, bloodsuckers, still holding secrets in their tiny stomachs. Sometimes we even find skin, or a stomach full of its last meal. Somewhere in the Gobi Desert, a fossil of 2 dinosaurs locked in combat is uncovered. One predator, one prey, caught in a final struggle, buried by sand and time. Their jaws still open, their claws still poised. It's not a skeleton, it's a memory. And from these memories we piece together the past. What they ate, how they moved, how they raised their young or abandoned them, how they hunted in packs or lived alone. We find bone beds, hundreds of individuals all fossilized together, suggesting migration, stampedes, droughts, flash floods, catastrophe and survival, written in calcium and clay. But perhaps most astonishing of all, we find them everywhere. Antarctica, Australia, Morocco, Montana, Mongolia. Dinosaurs were not rare. They were global. And that tells us something about the Earth itself, the climates, the ecosystems, the geography, the way weather flowed, rivers moved, wind carved the world over millions of years. When you study the Mesozoic, you don't just study dinosaurs. You study Earth. Its anger, its patience, its creativity. Because nothing the dinosaurs did, they did alone. The Earth was their canvas, their engine, their shelter and their stage, and though the players are gone, the set still holds traces. A petrified forest in Arizona, a cliff of ammonites in Alberta, a nesting ground in Patagonia. Even in your backyard, if you dig deep enough, the bones whisper. You can still hear them if you listen. And above it all, another eclipse begins. High in the sky, the moon slides slowly across the face of the sun, casting a dim veil across a world that no longer knows dinosaurs walk it. But they did, and their story is written in stone. We've talked a lot about the creatures of the Mesozoic, those towering sauropods, shrieking raptors, lumbering horned beasts. But to truly understand the world they lived in, we have to look down past the bones, beneath the footprints, deep into the ground. Because Mesozoic Earth wasn't just defined by what roamed its surface, but by what lay beneath it. Let's talk geology. And don't worry, this won't be a snooze fest about rocks. This is about a living, breathing planet that reshaped itself constantly, even as life scrambled to survive above. Beneath the jungle floors and ancient seas, Earth's crust was heaving. The tectonic plates, those massive slabs of stone riding on molten currents, were dancing, colliding, sliding, breaking. You think continental drift is boring? It's planet-scale origami, and the Mesozoic was folding fast. At the start of the era, the supercontinent Pangaea was a single massive landmass, but slowly as magma churned beneath it, it began to crack like a drying lake bed. Rifts opened, lava oozed, valleys formed, water poured in. The Atlantic Ocean, yeah, that thing we casually fly over today, didn't exist yet. It was born in the Mesozoic, a geological infant splitting the old world from the new. You can almost picture it, deep crevasses glowing red, the land stretching until it screams, then splitting in two like the world itself drawing a breath. And as the continents pulled apart, the coastlines exploded with life. Why? Because edges, ecotones, are where ecosystems flourish, where sea meets land, where forest meets plain, where mountain touches valley. The shifting continents created endless new coastlines, new rivers, new lakes, new chances for life to take root. You see it in the fossil record. Early in the Triassic, the land is dry, uniform, almost predictable. but by the Cretaceous, it's a chaotic masterpiece. Mountains in what is now the Rockies rise from the seabed. India, still a drifting island, races toward Asia like a battering ram. Africa and South America separate, forming the infant South Atlantic. Australia begins its lonely march away from Antarctica. And as the land moves, so does life. Species are trapped on islands. Some evolve into dwarves, others into giants. Isolation means mutation, and mutation means diversity. Dinosaurs in South America aren't the same as those in Asia. The ones in North America grow massive like Alamosaurus, a sauropod the length of 4 school buses. In China we find feathered raptors the size of house cats. In Madagascar, horned carnivores with strange crests. Geography doesn't just shape maps. It shapes monsters. And it doesn't stop underground. Volcanic activity was relentless throughout the Mesozoic. The Earth's crust was thinner then, hotter. Pressure built fast, and the result? Basalt floods. Imagine a volcano, not like the neat cones in a science textbook, but a gash in the earth that spills lava for 1,000,000 years. Rivers of molten rock pouring across entire regions, hundreds of feet thick, thousands of miles wide. These events scar the Earth. They poison air. They alter weather patterns. They may have contributed to multiple extinction events, including the end Triassic die-off. But they also fertilize. The minerals in volcanic ash feed soil. Plants thrive. Ecosystems recover faster. It's Earth's most violent reset button, and it was pressed often during the Mesozoic. And then there's the water. The Mesozoic oceans weren't just blue basins of salt. They were dynamic machines. Currents swirled differently because the continents weren't where they are today. The poles weren't always cold. The equator shifted. Sea levels rose, then dropped, then rose again. Entire regions that are deserts today, like Kansas or parts of Egypt, were once shallow seas filled with ammonites, marine reptiles, and strange plankton that would one day become limestone. Every rock tells a story. Layer by layer, the Mesozoic built its own autobiography. Red beds in Utah, layered with the bones of long-necked giants. Shale in Germany, filled with delicate feather impressions. Chalk cliffs in England, made from the crushed skeletons of microscopic algae that bloomed in Cretaceous seas. You walk across them today, not knowing that beneath your shoes lies a memory, 1,000,000,000 lives pressed into stone. And once in a while the earth cracks again, and we find one. A new fossil, a missing link, a tooth, still sharp, a claw, still curled. And suddenly the past is in our hands. But these discoveries don't just happen in deserts. In the Mesozoic, everything was alive, even the ground. Termite mounds the size of Volkswagens, burrows dug by early mammals, preserved in sandstone, trackways, those fossilized footprints stretching across old floodplains like highways to nowhere. They show movement, hesitation, speed. They tell us how dinosaurs walked, ran, even interacted. One trackway shows a herd moving together. A juvenile stumbles, adults slow, the group waits. That's not just biology. That's behavior. That's the earth, beneath their feet, remembering. And above it all, the sun dims. Another eclipse. The light filters through thick, humid clouds. The world cools slightly. Shadows grow long. Even now, in this age of stone and steam, the sky speaks. And the earth listens. As do we. Because when you dig into the Mesozoic, you're not digging up death. You're unearthing motion. The story of a world that was never still and never will be. To understand the world of the Mesozoic, you have to feel it, not just see it in your mind's eye, but wear it like a second skin. Imagine the heat pressing down on your shoulders, the air so thick with humidity that your lungs work twice as hard. The scent of ancient resin, moss and damp bark fills your nose. You wipe your brow, but the sweat's already been replaced. This was climate in the time of dinosaurs. And it wasn't just hot. It was hotter than anything you've likely ever experienced. No ice caps, no tundra, no snowy poles. Just a greenhouse. Earth warm from pole to pole. Even the Arctic had ferns and freshwater turtles. Yes, turtles in the Arctic. Global average temperatures during much of the Mesozoic were 10 to 15 degrees Celsius higher than today. That's not a heat wave, that's a new normal. Summer in what's now Montana might have felt like coastal Thailand, Antarctica, more like Florida, without the air conditioning. But it wasn't just heat, it was stability. For millions of years, Earth basked in what scientists call a climatic equable state. The seasons were mild, temperatures barely fluctuated year to year. That's why ferns and cycads could grow year-round. That's why cold-blooded reptiles could thrive in places that today are frozen half the year. And when temperatures are steady, ecosystems flourish. Plants grow larger, trees stretch taller, insects thrive, and big animals, really big animals, have space and time to evolve. You don't get a 100-foot sauropod in an ice age. You get it in an Earth that's warm, lush, and generous. But there's a catch. Warm doesn't mean peaceful. Because warm oceans move differently, they carry moisture further inland. They generate colossal storms, not hurricanes as we know them, but prehistoric cyclones that could last weeks, churn forests into pulp, and carve coastlines into memory. Rain would fall in sheets, whole valleys flooded, and then just as fast, drought. You'd have entire years where rain never came, ferns browned, terrestrials died in their nests, waterholes dried into bone-strewn pits. The earth gave, and the earth took back. And all the while, volcanoes breathed. CO2 levels were significantly higher than today, up to 6 to 10 times more. This wasn't industrial pollution, this was the Earth itself exhaling. Volcanic eruptions pumped carbon into the skies, enough to trap heat for millennia. It wasn't a crisis then, it was the status quo. Life evolved into it. Some plants developed thick leaves to conserve moisture. Others grew tall, fast, racing for sunlight in dense forests. Insects adapted to pollinate without wind. Dinosaurs developed air sacs in their bones, an ancient breathing system far more efficient than ours. It let them survive in a low-oxygen, high-humidity world. And then came the rains. Monsoons, driven by the shifting supercontinents and temperature gradients, swept across what would become India, China, and Africa. These weren't passing showers, they were seasonal tempests, hammering the ground for months, turning rivers into highways of mud and bone. Fossil sites show sudden mass deaths, herds drowned in flash floods, nests buried mid-hatch. Entire layers of sediment tell of cataclysmic washouts where one moment life was thriving and the next it was buried. But in that burial came preservation. The climate wasn't just a stage, it was a sculptor. Every drop of rain, every sunbeam, every volcanic haze, it shaped how creatures looked, how they moved, what they ate, and even how they slept. In places like what is now Liaoning, China, the fine silt from ancient lake beds captured the delicate remains of feathered dinosaurs, perfect impressions, down to the last filament. That climate, cooler for a time, yet moist and still, created a fossil wonderland like the Earth had paused just long enough to take a photograph. But not everywhere was so gentle. The Sahara, a death trap. During the mid-Cretaceous, it was a mega river system, home to beasts like Spinosaurus, adapted for water, fish-eating, and living in a swampy nightmare. But as sea levels rose and fell, the region turned dry, then wet, then dry again. Climate instability meant whole ecosystems could vanish in just a few thousand years. And yet, life kept adjusting. Some dinosaurs evolved long necks to reach the high canopy. Others grew beaks to crop low-lying ground cover. Some developed frills and horns, not just for defense, but to radiate heat like built-in air conditioners. Even their eggs changed. In the hot Cretaceous soil, some species buried their clutches in sand, like turtles. Others built raised nests and shaded them with foliage. Parental care evolved, not just from love, but from the sheer necessity of climate. Survival was about strategy, but the Earth was shifting again. By the late Cretaceous, CO2 levels began to fall. Volcanoes quieted. Temperatures dipped, just slightly, but enough to stress the balance. Seasonal swings grew harsher. The mild, gentle Mesozoic climate began to wobble. And the consequences, subtle but growing. Plant types began to change. Some regions grew drier, others colder. Migration routes altered, breeding seasons shifted. It was death by 1,000 tiny tilts. And then the asteroid. A final, brutal punctuation mark. But in truth, the Mesozoic climate had already started to fray. And now we chase it. In cores drilled from the Arctic seabed, we find pollen from tropical plants, proof that palm trees once swayed where glaciers now sit. In caves and rock walls, oxygen isotopes whisper of ancient weather. In chalk beds, we find layers of microscopic creatures who lived and died by temperature alone. Every data point, another note in Earth's forgotten symphony. A reminder that the climate is not constant. It breathes like lungs. It shifts like tides. It remembers like stone. And every eclipse that darkened the Mesozoic sky, each sudden chill, each moment of stillness was just one more breath in the long living rhythm of a planet always in motion. Close your eyes and listen. What do you hear? Maybe nothing at first, just the faint whisper of wind between prehistoric trees. But listen harder. Tune your ear to an ancient frequency and the Mesozoic comes alive with sound. Not noise, not chaos, but a wild symphony. Alive with clicks, chirps, growls, bellows, screeches, and drumming feet on wet earth. Because this world didn't just move, it spoke. Imagine standing in a Jurassic clearing at dawn, the sky still bruised with the last purple of night, dew clinging to every fern, and from somewhere nearby comes a deep, resonant call. Not like a lion's roar, lower, slower, like a cello made of lungs and thunder. That's a sauropod. Its voice echoes through its chest cavity, so large it may have used infrasound. Frequencies so low they rumbled below human hearing. These weren't sounds for the ear, they were for the bones. Herd members might have communicated over miles this way, their calls rolling like distant thunder across the mist. Further off, you hear the rattling honk of a hadrosaur, those duck-billed dinosaurs with elaborate head crests. Some, like Parasaurolophus, had hollow crests the length of a small child, not just for show, but for sound. Think of it like a built-in trombone. When it called out, air resonated through the crest, producing low-frequency bellows or even multi-toned cries. Males may have used them for mating calls, mothers for locating young, or herds for keeping together in dense forests. Birds today still do this. The cassowary, a living relic of the dinosaur world, emits deep booms through its chest. So does the emperor penguin, and the blue whale, Earth's largest modern animal, calls in frequencies meant not for song, but for survival. The past wasn't quiet. It just didn't sound like us. In the trees, small theropods click their jaws and make short staccato yelps, warning calls, startle cries, territory threats. Some would have had voice sacs, like frogs or birds, inflating their throats before letting loose. And then silence. Because the real predators didn't announce themselves. In the underbrush, a feathered raptor inches forward, silent, breath held, claws flexed. It makes no noise, not until the strike, and when it comes, there's only a flurry of rustling leaves, a brief screech, and then, again, silence. But above, a different song. Pterosaurs called through beaks as long as their legs, their cries like nothing alive today. Some species had crests that may have served as resonating chambers. Others may have clapped their jaws or whistled. Picture a mix of a howler monkey, a loon, and a wind tunnel. And there were likely times, just like now, when sound was survival. During mating seasons, the forests echoed with competing cries. Every call was a gamble, attract a mate or a predator. In nesting grounds, chaos reigned. Hundreds of individuals vocalizing at once like seabird colonies today. Fossil sites show clusters of eggs in carefully constructed nests. Some dinosaurs returned year after year, reusing ancient breeding grounds. You can hear them now, mothers crooning, hatchlings squeaking, chaos and care in equal measure. And then, weather. The rain didn't fall softly. It slammed down in sheets. Leaves hissed under the onslaught. Rivers rose and roared. Distant thunder cracked open the sky like a whip. Imagine the sound of a forest the size of France, soaked in downpour, while a herd of Triceratops shifts uneasily, their hooves squelching in the mud, their frills clacking as they jostle for space, and somewhere, under it all, the distant grumble of something massive moving through the storm. Even insects made their mark. Cicadas the size of hummingbirds hummed in rhythmic waves, beetles clattered in flight, mosquitoes droned oblivious to their status as evolutionary pests. You'd hear the fluttering of ancient moths, the grinding jaws of leaf munchers, the clicking of millipedes the length of your arm. Sound built up in layers. And, like any world, it had its moments of quiet. Dusk, when the sun dipped behind volcanic ridges and the forest glowed orange, might have brought a lull. Herbivores bedded down in circles. Predators climbed trees or crouched in caves. Birds, true birds now, ruffled feathers and tucked heads beneath wings. And then, as darkness set in, a different soundtrack. Nocturnal creatures emerged. Early mammals chirped in ultrasonic tones. Owls hadn't yet evolved, but something like them surely called from the trees. Small feathered theropods with glowing eyes and quiet steps hunted under the moonlight, and the chirping of frogs, prehistoric but recognizable, filled the marshlands. Now, imagine an eclipse. Not just darkness, but sudden darkness. The temperature drops, the shadows stretch and blend, the birds stop mid-call, insects pause mid-buzz, entire ecosystems hush, and for a few short minutes, the Mesozoic world holds its breath. Then a single note, maybe a trill from a crested raptor, breaks the silence and life resumes. The soundscape was not just background, it was communication, threat, music, identity. It told who was near, what was dangerous, where to go, and when to run. Today we try to imagine it in sterile labs with 3D reconstructions of dinosaur lungs and resonance chambers. We simulate roars, test frequencies, compare bird calls, but we'll never know it exactly. Because the real sound of the Mesozoic wasn't just in the voices of its creatures, but in the breathing earth itself, in wind over scales, in the slap of a tail on water, in the crack of a tree falling, in the heartbeat of a planet dreaming in ferns and feathers. The age of dinosaurs wasn't silent. It was a world of sound so vast, so alien, so immersive, that to live in it was to be part of the music. There's a tension that runs through the Mesozoic, an invisible thread pulled taut across millions of years, stretched between predator and prey. This wasn't a fairy tale jungle. It was a battlefield. A never-ending arms race of size, speed, stealth, and strategy. And at the heart of it all, one simple rule: adapt or die. The Mesozoic gave us the most iconic carnivores in Earth's history, and the most heavily armored prey. The balance was always tipping. A predator got faster, the prey got tougher, a dinosaur grew sharper claws, the next generation wore thicker skin. Let's start with the hunters. The most famous, of course, is Tyrannosaurus rex, and while we'll save his full tale for later, it's worth saying this: he was not a mistake of scale. He was the final form of meat-eating evolution, but he didn't come from nowhere. Before T-Rex, there were entire dynasties of predators that ruled the land. In the Jurassic, the throne belonged to Allosaurus. Imagine a creature nearly 30 feet long, with a skull built like a serrated can opener. Not the brute force of a tyrannosaur, but speed and finesse. Allosaurus likely hunted in groups. It may have ambushed sauropods. Yes, those 70-foot-tall giants with slashing attacks meant to bleed, not kill instantly. Its jaws were lighter than they looked. That made them fast, efficient. Behind it came Ceratosaurus, with a blade-like horn on its nose and teeth like curved steak knives. And then there was Megalosaurus, the first dinosaur ever scientifically described. Its fossils were found in England, its name meaning great lizard, but its true greatness came from how it moved through the forest, quietly, precisely, always just behind the next turn. As we move into the Cretaceous, the predators diversify. Spinosaurus was the aquatic anomaly, a semi-aquatic behemoth with a crocodile-like snout and a sail on its back. It didn't chase prey on land. It waded in rivers, jaws poised like a heron. Fossils suggest it swam, actual paddling like a 4-ton newt. Fish scales and bones found in its stomach confirm the diet. Then there were the raptors. Velociraptor gets all the fame, but it was relatively small, maybe 2 feet tall at the hip. It had feathers, a long stiff tail for balance, and most famously, a sickle-shaped claw on each foot lifted off the ground to stay sharp. They weren't solo killers. They were likely pack hunters, or at least opportunistic ones. Think, intelligent, coordinated, ruthless when needed. In Montana's fossil beds, we found signs of Deinonychus, a larger cousin hunting in groups, bite marks on prey bones, multiple individuals in the same kill site, teeth broken during attack. Paleontologists call it cooperative predation. That's science speak for bad news. If you were on the menu. But not every predator was giant. Some were small, fast, and terrifyingly smart. Troodon, for example, had one of the largest brain-to-body ratios of any dinosaur. It may have been as clever as modern birds. It had binocular vision, grasping hands, and sharp teeth, traits perfect for stalking prey in low light. And the predators kept changing because the prey kept fighting back. Let's talk defenses. Some herbivores relied on numbers. Hadrosaurs moved in herds so massive they could blanket a valley. Safety in numbers. They may have communicated with low-frequency calls, alerting others to danger. Others chose armor. Ankylosaurus is one of nature's tanks, covered in bony plates with a tail club that could shatter a leg. Fossil evidence shows damage on theropod bones consistent with blunt force trauma, possibly caused by a direct hit. And then you have Triceratops. 3 horns, a massive frill, muscles thick as boulders. Not passive prey. Triceratops likely charged at threats, like rhinos today. Fossils of T-Rex show puncture wounds, holes in the skull, possibly made by a Triceratops horn. Some battles were fought to the death, and neither side always won. Even sauropods had tricks. They weren't just slow-moving salad bars. Their tails could whip at supersonic speeds. Some may have used sound as a warning, like a cracking whip. Others simply relied on size. If you're 90 feet long and 50 tons, most predators will think twice. Eggs and nests were another battlefield. Predators often targeted the young. Herbivores developed complex nesting behaviors. Some guarded nests, others built decoy clutches. Fossilized nesting colonies show tight social structures, like penguin rookeries. Still, predators found a way. A theropod called Oviraptor was once thought to steal eggs, hence the name egg thief. But now we know it may have been protecting its own. The fossil was found atop a nest, arms spread, likely shielding its unhatched young. A tragedy misunderstood. But that's the thing about the Mesozoic. It wasn't just killer versus victim. It was survival versus extinction. And for 180 million years the balance held. Then came the fire from the sky. And in the silence after, only the cleverest, smallest and luckiest lived to hear the next eclipse. They weren't supposed to have feathers. Not in the movies, not in the colouring books, not in the dusty museum dioramas of old. Dinosaurs were scaly, cold-blooded monsters, dragons that once walked the earth. But then came the fossils, and with them, a whisper from the past. Feathers! Not on birds, on dinosaurs. It started in the 1990s in the Liaoning province of northeastern China. A treasure trove of fossils began emerging from fine-grained lake beds, so detailed they preserved not just bones but skin, soft tissue and feathers, filaments, fringes, full veins and barbs. The Mesozoic's secret was out. Dinosaurs had been hiding their plumage all along. Let's be clear, not all dinosaurs had feathers. Sauropods, scaled, stegosaurs, same. But the theropods, those bipedal predators that gave rise to birds, were a different story. They weren't just experimenting with feathers. They were evolving with them. Feathers didn't begin for flight. No, their first purpose was simpler, more primal. Warmth. Early feathers were short, fuzzy filaments. Think of them like dino fuzz. Insulation for small-bodied creatures trying to keep their core temperature stable. Because many theropods weren't cold-blooded at all, they were probably warm-blooded, or something close to it. Fast metabolisms, active lifestyles, feathers kept them alive. But as with all evolutionary tools, Feathers found new uses. Display. You've seen it in birds today. Peacocks, birds of paradise, cassowaries, colour, pattern, motion. Feathers aren't just practical, they're theatrical. In the Mesozoic, raptors strutted with fans of tail feathers. Some had head crests that may have shimmered with iridescence. One fossil, Anchiornis, even preserved traces of pigment. It had a dark body, white feathers on its wings, and a red mohawk. The dinosaur. With a mohawk. Feathers became signals. I'm healthy. I'm dangerous. I'm ready. I'm here. Then came a bigger leap. Gliding. Some feathered theropods took to the trees. Clawed fingers gripped bark. Long tails acted as rudders. Feathers thickened. Wings lengthened. Microraptor, for example, had 4 wings, 2 on its arms, 2 on its legs. It didn't flap like a bird. It glided, bat-like, from tree to tree. It was a prototype, a design still in testing. And slowly, over millions of years, gliding became flight. The first real flyers, like Archaeopteryx, didn't look like modern birds. They had teeth, clawed hands, long bony tails, but they had asymmetrical feathers, the kind used for flight. They had wishbones like the ones we snap at Thanksgiving. Their bones were hollow, light, strong. They could fly. Not far, not gracefully, but enough. Enough to escape, enough to hunt, enough to change everything. Birds didn't descend from dinosaurs. Birds are dinosaurs. Every time a pigeon struts past you on a sidewalk, you're looking at a survivor of the asteroid. The only lineage of theropods that made it through. Chickens, hawks, swans, penguins, all wearing the bones of beasts that once ruled the earth. The fossils back this up. A specimen of Sinosauropteryx had banded tail feathers, possibly striped like a raccoon. Another, Uterinus, was a feathered tyrannosaur over 30 feet long. Yes, a giant fuzzy T-Rex relative. That mental image you're forming right now, it's real. Even baby dinosaurs may have hatched covered in down. Which raises another idea, parenting. Feathers, like in birds today, may have helped brood eggs, keep them warm, shelter them from rain. Fossils show adult theropods crouched over nests, arms spread protectively. This wasn't lizard-like behavior. This was care. This was connection. Imagine a Cretaceous dawn, mist on the ground, a mother dinosaur, feathers ruffled, eyes alert, guarding her eggs. Around her the world awakens, distant calls, rustling leaves, the drip of dew from ferns. And above, another eclipse begins. A sudden dimming. She tilts her head, stares upward. For a moment, all is shadow, feathers fluttering in slow wind. Then light returns. And with it, the past continues its spiral into the present. Today, we know birds are the closest thing we have to time machines. They still use the same breathing systems, the same eggshell chemistry, the same bone structure. When you watch a bird scratch the ground, ruffle its feathers, or flap in alarm, you're watching behavior that evolved on a different Earth, in a different era, among giants. Feathers were never the punchline. They were the plan, and they've been telling us the truth all along, if we knew how to listen. The dinosaurs ruled the world above, but beneath them, in the roots and shadows, another story was unfolding, a quieter story, one that would take tens of millions of years to bloom, and one that would shape our own existence. This is the story of the mammals of the Mesozoic. Not the woolly mammoths or saber-toothed cats you might be picturing. Those come much later. The mammals of the Mesozoic were small, secretive, and largely forgotten until we started digging. And what we found, it changed everything. Because while dinosaurs grew to the size of city buses, mammals did the opposite. They went small, stealthy, flexible. A typical Mesozoic mammal might have been the size of a mouse, a shrew, or maybe a squirrel on a good day. But they weren't dumb, or weak, or boring. They were survivors, masters of the margins. They lived in the spaces dinosaurs ignored, under leaves, inside logs, beneath roots. They came out at night, when the predators slept and the world cooled. They evolved hearing so sharp, some could likely detect the wing beat of an insect. Why so small? Because small meant fast. Small meant quiet. Small meant you didn't get stepped on by a wandering iguanodon, or scooped up by a hungry raptor. Small meant you could dig, climb, hide, adapt. And they weren't just surviving, they were diversifying. Fossils show that Mesozoic mammals weren't one size fits all. Some had flat teeth for grinding plants, others had sharp molars for slicing meat. Some were semi-aquatic, others were gliders like Velatioe, which had flaps of skin between limbs, millions of years before flying squirrels. One, called Repenomophale, was nearly 3 feet long and had dinosaur bones in its stomach. Yes, a mammal that ate dinosaurs. Granted, small ones, hatchlings, but still, proof that mammals weren't just prey, they were predators too. They had fur, not feathers, but dense insulating hair, likely whiskers, warm-blooded metabolism, possibly even sweat glands. The foundations of what would become us were being laid in the loam beneath dinosaur feet. And they did something else. Something astonishing. They raised their young, not with cold nests or buried eggs, but with milk. Glands evolved to nourish newborns, allowing longer developmental periods, more learning, more bonding, more survival. That was revolutionary. Because in a world where everything wanted to eat you, raising smart, adaptable offspring was a massive evolutionary flex. While dinosaurs laid clutches of eggs and hoped for the best, mammals cradled their young, protected them, passed down learnt behavior. They were building not just bodies, but minds. And those minds would one day inherit the earth, but not yet. Because every night when the sun set behind the spines of stegosaurs, the mammals emerged. Quiet, curious, cautious, they scurried through leaf litter, climbed low branches, sniffed for bugs, licked dew from leaves, and when dawn came, they vanished again into burrows, hollows, and darkness. They weren't kings, they were ghosts, and they saw the world not from above, but from below. Watching titans pass overhead, feeling the rumble of sauropod footsteps in their bones, dodging the talons of oviraptors. Imagine being one of them. Your world is a maze of roots and tunnels. You eat what you find. You raise your young in silence. You watch the skies for danger. You hear sounds no dinosaur ever could. And one day, as the light shifts, an eclipse begins. The temperature drops. The shadows deepen. But to you, it's just another moment in a life lived carefully. You wait. You listen. And when the light returns, so do you. They may have been small, but their story outlasted the giants. They inherited the ruins. They spread. They grew. They became the lions, the whales, the primates, the humans. But in the Mesozoic, they simply endured. And in a world full of monsters, that was enough. The Mesozoic wasn't just a land of forests and thunderous footsteps. Below the waves, in the deep blue silence, an entirely different kingdom was rising. One just as ancient, just as strange, and far less understood. This is the story of the Mesozoic oceans. And it begins not with a splash, but with a silence, a quiet expanse of salt and shadow, still reeling from the Permian extinction when most marine life was wiped away. Coral reefs collapsed, trilobites vanished, the seas turned toxic. But Earth, resilient as always, began again. Tiny organisms, plankton, foraminifera, radiolarians returned first. Microscopic architects of new ecosystems, they formed the base of the food web, drifting on currents, feeding small fish, which fed bigger fish, which fed the monsters. Let's dive in. Early on, the seas were ruled by creatures like nothosaurs and plesiosaurs, long-necked marine reptiles that moved like serpentine ballerinas through shallow seas. Their paddled limbs weren't for speed, they were for grace, slow, deliberate, ghostly. And then came the ichthyosaurs. Picture a creature shaped like a dolphin, with the jaws of a crocodile and eyes the size of dinner plates. Some reached 50 feet long. They weren't related to whales, but they filled the same role. Apex predators, fast, intelligent, born to chase. Their fossils are often found with live births fossilized mid-delivery tail first, just like modern whales and dolphins. It means they didn't lay eggs, they gave birth at sea. A full marine life, no return to land. That was new, and the seas kept evolving. As the Jurassic dawned, the oceans grew deeper. Continental drift tore Pangaea apart, creating new basins, trenches, and island chains. Where land broke, water filled the gaps. Oceans lapped at fresh coastlines. Coral reefs reassembled, vast, intricate, and alive. Among them swam ammonites, coiled-shelled mollusks with jet propulsion and tentacled mouths. Some as small as coins, others the size of beach balls. Their shells, with their perfect spirals and chambered interiors, are still found today, sometimes polished, sometimes opalized. They were everywhere, a hallmark of Mesozoic oceans, and every time there was an extinction they rebounded. They were survivors right up until they weren't. We'll get there. By the Cretaceous, the oceans had changed again. The western interior seaway sliced through North America, a vast inland sea from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico, shallow, warm, and teeming with life. And at the top of the food chain, Mosasaurus. Let's talk about this beast. A marine lizard, not a dinosaur. Closer to a Komodo dragon than a shark, up to 50 feet long, with a tail that moved side to side like a snake, and jaws that could crush bone. It didn't nibble, it consumed. It's been found with entire prey animals in its gut. Fossils show multiple species, each adapted to different prey. Some had narrow snouts for fish, others had blunt teeth for crushing ammonites. They were fast, efficient, deadly, and they ruled. Around them, the oceans filled with early sharks, bony fish, and strange hybrids. Some fish looked like flying daggers. Others had armor plating. Rays skimmed the seafloor. Sea turtles glided like cloaked ships. Giant squid, relatives of today's, battled in the inky blackness. And in the skies above, pteranodons dove for fish. Wingspans over 20 feet. Lightweight bones, beaks like scissors. They didn't hover. They soared, gliding over waves, spotting shimmer, diving hard. The seas were alive. And not just with animals. Reefs buzzed with invertebrates. Sponges, echinoderms, mollusks. Plankton bloomed in such numbers that when they died and sank, they formed thick layers on the seafloor, which today make up chalk. Yes, chalk. The white cliffs of Dover, ancient plankton from the Cretaceous ocean floor. You're writing on ocean life. But this watery world wasn't stable. Tectonics changed coastlines constantly. Volcanoes under the sea built islands, then drowned them. Ocean currents shifted. Oxygen levels dipped. Some marine life suffocated. Others adapted. Some grew monstrous. One fossil, Shonisaurus, shows an ichthyosaur over 70 feet long. That's longer than a humpback whale. And then, one day, silence. The asteroid didn't just strike land. It struck the sea. Tsunamis over 1,000 feet high, shockwaves through the deep, a rain of molten rock that boiled the surface layer of the ocean. Plankton died en masse. Coral reefs bleached. Ammonites vanished. Mosasaurs gone. The Mesozoic ocean died in a week. And yet, from that silence, the seeds of the modern sea were born. New fish, new sharks, new reefs. But the echoes remain. Today, when you walk a beach and pick up a shell, you're holding the spiral memory of a vanished world. When you see a dolphin leap or a whale breach, you're watching modern forms fill ancient roles. And when you look out at the horizon, at a sea that stretches beyond vision, you're staring into a graveyard and a cradle. Because the ocean has always been both. When you picture a forest today, you might see maple trees shedding golden leaves, oaks full of squirrels, pine cones crunching underfoot, maybe even a flowering dogwood blooming in spring. Now erase all of that. Because in the Mesozoic, forests were alien. There were no flowers, no fruits, no grass, no deciduous trees. Just towering gymnosperms, plants that don't use flowers or fruit to reproduce. The world's greenery came in cones, spores, and wind-blown gametes. Welcome to the forests of deep time. At the dawn of the Triassic, forests struggled to return after the Permian collapse, but they came back strong. First with conifers, cousins to redwoods and pines. Their long, waxy needles and thick bark were perfect for dry, fire-prone climates. And fire was constant. There were no broadleaf trees to dampen the canopy. When lightning struck, the whole forest went up. But fire was part of the system. Many conifers thrived after burns. Their cones opened with heat. Their seeds scattered. Their roots stayed alive underground. Fire wasn't destruction. It was renewal. Alongside them grew cycads plants that look like a cross between palms and ferns, but are neither. Their trunks are squat, their fronds stiff. They grow slow, painfully slow. Some cycads alive today are nearly unchanged from their Jurassic ancestors, and they were everywhere. Some estimates suggest cycads made up 20% of the world's plant life during the Jurassic. They were the salad bar of the dinosaurs. Another major player, ginkgos. Yes, the same ones that line urban streets today. But back then, they grew wild, fan-shaped leaves fluttering like paper, resistant to disease, fireproof, almost unkillable. A living fossil that has watched empires rise and fall without so much as a wilt. Then came the tree ferns. Ancient giants that reproduced with spores instead of seeds. Their leaves, massive and unfurling, caught the dew and mist of the humid Mesozoic air. They formed dense underbrush in lowland forests, perfect cover for small dinosaurs and early mammals. And carpeting the forest floor, mosses, liverworts and club mosses, some as tall as a person. It was a world without grass. So what covered the plains? Short ferns, shrubs, low conifers. If you stood in an open field, it wouldn't wave with golden grain. It'd be stiff, dark green and filled with rough, fibrous plants. And that shaped the animals. Herbivores needed massive stomachs to break down tough cellulose. Sauropods evolved fermentation chambers that may have taken days to digest a single meal. They swallowed stones, gastroliths, to help grind plant matter in their guts. That's right, dinosaurs ate rocks on purpose. Some even had multi-toothed jaws for processing plants. Hadrosaurs, for example, had over 900 teeth, not for biting, but for chewing like a living lawnmower. And yet, despite all this ancient green, something new was stirring. By the mid-Cretaceous, angiosperms, flowering plants began to appear. Tiny at first, simple, but fast-growing, more adaptable, more diverse. They started as shrubs, then vines, then trees. They reproduced with flowers, not cones. Their seeds came in fruit, not shells. They attracted pollinators, a new way to spread genes, more efficient, more colourful, more clever. And they spread like wildfire, faster than any gymnosperm. It was a revolution in slow motion, and it threatened everything that came before. Cycads declined, ferns retreated, even conifers lost ground. The green old order gave way to new blossoms. By the end of the Cretaceous, flowers dotted the earth. Still not dominant, but rising, and with them came bees, butterflies, fruit eaters. The food web began to change, not overnight, but permanently. Today, 90% of plant species are angiosperms. Every fruit you eat, every flower you see, every field of grass, none of it existed during most of the Mesozoic. But it began there as a quiet mutation in the undergrowth. And as it bloomed, dinosaurs, some at least, began to eat it. Others ignored it. A few may have helped spread it. And beneath those prehistoric canopies, in the green glow of fern and conifer shade, a forest insect stirs. It senses a new scent, a bloom, a pollen trail. It moves toward it. A partnership is born. And above, as sunlight breaks through the mist, the world warms again. And everything stills. We've seen their bones, studied their claws, measured their teeth, speculated their feathers. But what about their minds? What did the world look like through the eyes of a dinosaur? Not in terms of biology alone, but in terms of awareness, emotion, behavior. Could they solve problems, raise families, dream? Let's step inside the skulls of giants. Start with a common assumption. Dinosaurs were dumb. That idea lingered for over a century. Why? Because early paleontologists measured brain cavities and found them small relative to body size. But brains aren't all about size. It's structure that matters, and complexity. Take Troodon, a small feathered theropod from the late Cretaceous. Its brain-to-body ratio was among the highest of any non-avian dinosaur. It had large forward-facing eyes, excellent depth perception, and a big olfactory bulb, meaning its sense of smell was sharp. Some researchers even suggest it had the intelligence of a modern bird, maybe a raven or parrot. Not Einstein, but not stupid. It likely hunted at night, planned ambushes, perhaps even recognized landmarks. Some scientists hypothesize that if the asteroid hadn't hit, dinosaurs like Troodon might have evolved into hyper-intelligent descendants, reptilian analogues of primates. An unsettling thought, but not impossible. Then there's raptors. Movies exaggerated their size, but they got one thing right. Raptors were clever. Pack hunters. Maybe. Coordinated attacks. Possibly. Their curved claws weren't just weapons, they were tools. They may have used them to pin prey, test for danger, or even manipulate objects. And the best sign of intelligence? Parental care. Fossils show raptors brooding nests, feathers spread to warm eggs. Some died in place, protecting their young from floods or predators. That level of commitment suggests more than instinct. It hints at attachment. Emotional, perhaps not in a human sense, but something close, something meaningful. Even herbivores showed signs of social intelligence. Hadrosaurs, the duckbills, lived in enormous herds, thousands strong. Fossilized nesting grounds show generation after generation returning to the same spots. Nests arranged in patterns. Eggshell fragments suggest coordinated hatching. They raised their young in groups, protected them. That's not just a strategy, it's culture. They had complex vocalizations too, resonating chambers in their skulls for communication. Each individual may have had a slightly different call, a name in effect. Now picture a Triceratops. Massive, heavily armored, not typically seen as smart, but fossils show intraspecific combat. Triceratops fighting Triceratops for mates, territory, pride, whatever the reason, they remembered. Repeated behaviors, ritualized conflict, social rules. Even T-Rex, long considered a mindless bruiser, may have had a more nuanced mind. Its olfactory system was enormous. It could smell prey from miles away. Its eyes faced forward, unusual for reptiles, granting depth perception. And its brain, bigger than many predators before it. Some studies suggest it could recognize individuals, possibly even coordinate with others. Were they loners? Maybe, but maybe not always. Some fossil sites show multiple T-Rex skeletons together. Coincidence? Or the remains of a social structure? We don't know, but we're learning. And as we learn, the image of dinosaurs shifts. They're no longer slow, dumb beasts waiting to be replaced. They're animals, real ones, with instincts, adaptations, behaviors. They cared for young, they may have mourned, they watched for danger, chose mates, fled wildfires, tracked prey, defended nests. And maybe, just maybe, when they slept, they dreamed. Birds do. They enter REM sleep, they twitch, their brains light up, they replay experiences, they imagine. If birds dream, why not dinosaurs? Picture a small raptor, curled in a feathered nest, eyes shut, its claws twitch, its tail flicks. In its mind it runs, it leaps, it flies. A dream of chase. A memory of wind. A signal from a world that's long gone but never forgotten. And above it the stars wheel. The moon slides. An eclipse begins. And in the shadows, even the dreams grow still. Let's lift off. No, really, look up. Because the Mesozoic wasn't just a ground war. It wasn't only about teeth, tails, and thunderous herds. High above the ferns, where the air thinned and the clouds drifted, another kingdom flourished. One of wings, wind, and wild design. This is the age of the pterosaurs, the first vertebrates to take powered flight. Not birds, not bats, something else entirely. They were the original pilots of the sky. Their story begins in the late Triassic, around 230 million years ago, when a group of small climbing reptiles developed an extraordinary adaptation, a membrane of skin stretched from elongated fingers to their bodies, sometimes even down to their legs. Not feathers, not fluff, just pure functional wing skin. From that modest blueprint evolved some of the most bizarre creatures to ever ride the thermals. Some were tiny. Nemicalopterus, for example, was no bigger than a sparrow, light, nimble, insect hunter. Others, absolutely colossal. Let's talk about Quetzalcoatlus. Wingspan 33 to 36 feet. That's the size of a small plane. It stood as tall as a giraffe when grounded. Its beak was longer than you are tall. Toothless, built for scavenging or spearing prey in shallow waters. It may have stalked prey like a stork, but when it took off, it was like watching gravity surrender. But how did something that big even fly? Modern birds use a run-and-jump launch, pushing off with powerful legs and flapping hard. Quetzalcoatlus likely used a quadrupedal launch, vaulting into the air with all four limbs, like a catapult made of flesh and bone. Its bones were hollow, reinforced by internal struts, lightweight yet strong. Its lungs, highly efficient air sac systems shared with birds and some theropods, constant oxygen flow, no energy wasted. Its wings? A marvel of bioengineering muscle, collagen and keratin, flexible yet taut, shifting shape in flight to handle turbulence, thermals and tailwinds. It could soar for hours, maybe days, using updrafts and coastal winds to travel vast distances. Pterosaurs dominated the skies for over 150 million years. That's longer than birds have existed. They occupied nearly every aerial niche. Insect eaters, fishers, filter feeders, frugivores, carnivores. Some had crests larger than their bodies, used not for flight but for mating displays or aerodynamic balance. Others had fine teeth like baleen to sift plankton. Some even had fuzz, a hair-like covering we call pycnofibers. Not quite feathers, but good for insulation, meaning they were probably warm-blooded. Fast metabolism, high energy, high performance. But here's what makes pterosaurs truly spectacular. They were innovators. Their wings were constantly being tweaked by evolution. Some had short, broad wings for tight forest maneuvering. Others had long, narrow wings for ocean gliding. One, Pterodostro, had thousands of bristle-like teeth to filter shrimp from water. It was a flying flamingo before flamingos were cool. Another, Tapejara, had a vertical sail-like crest and lived near coastal cliffs. Its skull was shaped like a paper aeroplane made of bone. And they weren't all high flyers. Some foraged on foot, waddling across mudflats, stabbing at crabs and squabbling like modern gulls. Fossils show they nested in colonies, raised young, and possibly mated for life. Some had strong enough legs to walk long distances. Others barely functioned on the ground, pure aerialists. They lived with the dinosaurs, but they weren't dinosaurs. They were their own branch, and they owned the skies. Until the end, when the asteroid hit, the skies burned. The upper atmosphere filled with soot and sulfur. Sunlight vanished. Plants died, and the insects disappeared. For pterosaurs who depended on open skies and constant food, it was catastrophic. The large ones likely went first. The smaller ones maybe days or weeks later. Their bones so light, so fragile, seldom fossilized in the chaos. And then they were gone. Extinct. Replaced by birds who were better adapted for short-term survival, better equipped to eat seeds, better suited to forest regrowth. But for over 100 million years, pterosaurs were the sky. Their silhouettes crossed every sunrise, their shadows swept across seas and sand dunes, their cries echoed off canyon walls. Imagine looking up in the late Cretaceous. A warm wind blows across a coastal plain. Overhead, a group of Nyctosaurus glides past, slim-bodied, long-winged, trailing bony crests like wind vanes. Then the light dims. A partial eclipse casts strange shadows. They wheel, they adjust, they vanish into the haze. And for a moment, the sky holds its breath. Then one calls out. A raspy, reedy trill. A signal. The light will return. And it does. It always does. But not for them. Their time came and soared away. By the time the Cretaceous rolled in like a slow-motion avalanche, Dinosaurs had already ruled Earth for over 100 million years. You'd think they'd be slowing down, coasting toward retirement. But no, this wasn't the age of dinosaurs resting on their laurels. This was their arms race. Cretaceous Earth was like a biological laboratory gone wild. Every creature was sharper, faster, louder, weirder, and more specialized than anything the Jurassic had seen. Nature had cranked evolution up to 11 point. Let's start with the predators. Tyrannosaurus rex was the exclamation mark at the end of the sentence. But before T-Rex stomped his way into late Cretaceous stardom, there were other power players. Meet Giganotosaurus, the South American terror that rivaled or even surpassed T-Rex in length. Unlike T-Rex's bone-crushing bite, Giganotosaurus had a slashing strategy: longer jaws, lighter skull, multiple cuts instead of one devastating crunch. Different continents, different weapons. Then there's Carcharodontosaurus, the shark-toothed lizard, which earned its name for teeth shaped like steak knives. Found in Africa, it grew over 40 feet long and likely hunted the massive sauropods that still roamed the southern continents. And yes, Spinosaurus again, with its crocodilian jaws and massive sail. New studies suggest it was built for a semi-aquatic lifestyle. It may have walked awkwardly on land, but was fluid and deadly in water, like a 50-foot murder newt. Predators weren't just growing, they were adapting. Vision became sharper, smell more precise, teeth more specialized. Some raptors, like Dromaeosaurus, developed deeper skulls and more powerful bites. Others, like Balor, evolved double sickle claws on each foot, because one wasn't enough. And as predators got smarter, faster, and more cunning, the herbivores fought back. The Cretaceous herbivore lineup was brutal. Let's talk horns. Triceratops, sure, but he wasn't alone. There were whole genera of horned ceratopsians. Styracosaurus, with its spiked frill like a medieval morning star. Pachyrhinosaurus, which had no horns but a bony battering ram on its face. Centrosaurus, Chasmosaurus, Torosaurus, each variation a new attempt at survival. Some used horns to fend off predators. Others used them for intraspecies combat. Fossils show gouged frills and fractured horn tips, proof of battle, not just for survival, but for dominance. Then came the tanks. Ankylosaurs were basically living fortresses. Their backs were covered in fused armor plates, and their tails ended in bone-crushing clubs. Some clubs were the size of bowling balls, and they worked. Fossils of theropods show crushed bones from ankylosaur blows. Imagine being a 40-foot carnivore and still getting your legs shattered by a walking boulder. Even hadrosaurs, the so-called duck-billed dinosaurs, weren't defenseless. They were highly social, fast, and had incredible vocal abilities. Some had crests like Corythosaurus, which acted like sound amplifiers. Their herds likely moved with complex communication, trumpet-like calls echoing across floodplains. Not every defense was physical. Some herbivores relied on numbers, others on speed, some on intelligence. Even egg strategy became a battleground. Certain dinosaurs laid eggs in spiraled patterns to confuse predators. Others buried theirs or camouflaged them in foliage. Plants joined the fight too. This was the age when flowering plants began to explode across the landscape. Outcompeting the old guard, they grew faster, reproduced quicker. They attracted pollinators, which allowed them to spread in ways gymnosperms never could. In turn, insects evolved new weapons, longer proboscises, better flight, hive coordination. Bees buzzed, butterflies flitted, ants organized. A silent war unfolded under the feet of dinosaurs. The ecosystem got louder, busier, more competitive. Everything was amped up. The food chains grew tighter. The apex predators hunted smarter prey. The prey evolved harder defenses. The climate fluctuated. Volcanism ramped up in some regions. The continents drifted further apart, creating isolated ecosystems and isolated evolution. And then came the final pieces. Avian dinosaurs, the earliest true birds, spread widely by the late Cretaceous. They filled forest canopies, coastal cliffs, and inland swamps. Some had teeth, others didn't. Some had claws, some flew poorly, others soared. They were the bridge between eras. And below them, mammals had diversified too. Small primates, rodents, climbers, burrowers, ready, waiting. The Mesozoic arms race didn't have a winner. It had a climax. The world grew louder, brighter, faster. It crescendoed. And then it stopped. But for that final stretch of time, every sunrise over the Cretaceous was greeted by a world fully armed, at the peak of its evolutionary game, a world that had taken millions of years to become perfect. Just before it was shattered, you wouldn't know it by looking up at the sky. There's no alarm, no ominous music, no narration. The sun still rises over the fern-laced lowlands. Pterosaurs glide over rivers like they always have. Triceratops graze in herds. A lone Tyrannosaurus sniffs the wind, stalking through forest shadows. The earth spins on as if nothing's coming. But something is coming, and it will change everything. This is the story of the final days of the dinosaurs, not just the impact, but the world just before it. Let's rewind to the late Cretaceous, around 66.1 million years ago. North America is split by a vast inland sea. The Western Interior Seaway cuts the continent in two on one side, lush coastal plains crawling with dinosaurs, on the other, dense conifer forests, volcanic highlands, and inland deserts. The fauna? Fully formed. Tyrannosaurus rex rules the west. Triceratops, Ankylosaurus, and Pachycephalosaurus make up the armored vanguard. Edmontosaurus and other hadrosaurs wander in massive herds, stamping through the wetlands like scaly elephants. Birds flit in the canopy, mammals chirp in the roots, flowers bloom like evolutionary fireworks. It's a high-functioning, bustling world. The ecosystems are complex, dense, balanced. Predators have rivals, prey has defenses, parasites have hosts. It's not chaos, it's symphony. But underneath that balance, tectonic plates are groaning. In India, the Deccan Traps, a region the size of Texas, have begun a series of colossal volcanic eruptions. They release lava and gas, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide. It seeps into the air, triggers warming and acid rain. Oceans begin to acidify, coral reefs struggle, temperature bands shift. Life adjusts, but it's stressed. Then, above it all, in the vastness of space, a rock is moving, a 6-mile-wide asteroid named Chicxulub. It's been traveling for millions of years. No one knows how long it's been on course, but it's coming fast. And on one day, an ordinary day, as far as the dinosaurs can tell, it arrives. Impact. The asteroid strikes the shallow seas off what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. It hits at 20 kilometers per second. That's over 45,000 miles per hour. The energy released is equivalent to 10 billion Hiroshima bombs in a fraction of a second. The sea vaporizes. Rock and water explode into the atmosphere. Fireballs rain across the planet. Earthquakes ripple outward. Waves hundreds of feet high crash onto coasts. Tsunamis cross oceans. Within hours, the planet burns. Everything within thousands of kilometers of the impact is incinerated. Forests turn to ash. Dinosaurs die in place. Pterosaurs fall from the sky. Marine reptiles boil in their seas. But the worst is yet to come. Because all that debris, ash, sulfur, carbon, gets thrown into the atmosphere. It blocks sunlight. Photosynthesis halts. Plants die. Then the herbivores. Then the carnivores. A global winter begins. Temperatures plummet. Acid rain pours. Food webs collapse like a row of dominoes. And it doesn't end quickly. For months, years, the Earth is plunged into chaos. Survivors are few. Small mammals burrow underground. Some birds cling to survival. Crocodilians, turtles, and certain amphibians ride it out in rivers and lakes. But the age of dinosaurs? Over. All non-avian dinosaurs vanish. So do the pterosaurs. So do the ammonites, the large marine reptiles, the reef ecosystems. More than 75% of all species on Earth are wiped out. It's the fifth mass extinction and the most famous. But here's the thing, no one tells you. This extinction wasn't just the end of dinosaurs. It was the end of an entire world system, the Mesozoic Earth. The forests, the sounds, the skies, the seas, it's all gone. What follows is something new. But in those final days before the blast, it wasn't panic. It was routine. Dinosaurs did what they'd always done. They hunted, nested, wandered. They didn't see it coming. There was no crescendo, no roar. Just a distant sky, growing brighter. Just a ripple in the wind. Just another eclipse. And then, a silence that would last millions of years. The blast had passed, the skies were dark, the winds were cold, and the world was quiet. Not peaceful, not calm, but hollow like a song cut off mid-note. The age of dinosaurs was over, and what remained was a husk of the vibrant planet that had existed just days before. Now came the slow, painful work of rebuilding. The first days after impact were the most brutal. Ash and soot clogged the upper atmosphere. Sunlight, barely visible. Temperatures dropped drastically. Plants died without light. Food chains evaporated. The herbivores starved. The carnivores followed. The Earth's surface became a wasteland. Scattered fires burned where oxygen still lingered. Rain turned acidic. Dust coated everything in a fine, choking layer of extinction. Entire ecosystems vanished without leaving more than a layer of soot and sorrow. So, who survived? Not many. But some, the mammals, those shadow dwellers from the Mesozoic's underworld, emerged into the light. They were small, yes, but resilient, omnivorous, capable of eating anything: seeds, insects, roots, carrion. Many had burrows to retreat into. Some could slow their metabolisms, hibernate, wait. They were built for collapse. They had already lived in a dinosaur's world. Now, without giants above, they were free to expand. Among the rubble, the birds, the only surviving dinosaurs, picked their way through scorched underbrush. Not all made it. Most lineages were snuffed out. But a few, particularly those capable of ground foraging, survived. No longer coexisting with pterosaurs. Now they inherited the skies. In the oceans, survival was just as cruel. The plankton, microscopic but essential, suffered massive die-offs. The oceans turned murky. Food chains collapsed. Coral reefs bleached and died. But a few species of fish, sharks, rays, and marine invertebrates managed to hold on. Deep-sea creatures, especially those that fed on detritus drifting from above, were less affected. Darkness, cold, pressure. They were used to it. On land, insects survived in droves. Beetles, ants, termites. They fed on decay, on wood, on waste. Where there was death, they thrived. And where there were insects, there was food. Even some amphibians clung to life in damp refuges. Swamps, ponds, mudholes. Their cold-blooded metabolisms made them patient. Quiet, adaptable. But for the dinosaurs, the great thunder lizards, it was over. Their bones settled into the ash. Their voices silenced. Their world erased. Or was it? Because layered in their extinction was the DNA of a future. The birds carried on their legacy. The mammals carried on their timing. And the planet slowly began to recover. Over decades and centuries, the ash settled, the clouds thinned, sunlight returned, and with it, the plants. Angiosperms, those flowering upstarts of the late Cretaceous, were quick to take root. They spread rapidly across the scarred earth. Grasses appeared in earnest. Trees evolved broader leaves. The forests regrew, and with them came the insects, and then the mammals, and eventually the future. But Earth bore the scar. Today you can still see the mark of that impact. It's buried beneath the Yucatan Peninsula, the Chicxulub crater, 1,112 miles wide, 12 miles deep, a wound that changed everything. And in the rock layers across the planet, there's a thin, dark line. A line of iridium, rare on Earth but common in asteroids. That line is called the KPG boundary. It's the moment the curtain dropped on the Mesozoic. Everything below it, dinosaurs. Everything above it, us. But even now, there are echoes. A bird on a branch, a lizard in the sun, a mammal twitching in sleep. all descendants of those who survived, all part of a legacy forged in fire. So no, the dinosaurs didn't all die. Some of them just changed clothes. Others became bones to be rediscovered. And all of them became part of the story, one etched into every fossil, every feather, every distant sunrise. And maybe, just maybe, they dream still, in the DNA of life, in the myths of memory, in the eclipses that return like clockwork, brief moments when the world goes dark, the wind slows, and something ancient stirs in the shadows. Not fear, but remembrance. Beneath the soil, under cities and deserts and forests, lies a forgotten architecture, not of buildings, but of bones. The skeletons of the Mesozoic didn't just disappear. They waited, buried in riverbeds, entombed in mud, scattered across floodplains and lake shores. Over millions of years, soft tissue rotted away. The bones were crushed, mineralized, transformed, and what remained became fossils. Let's talk about how. When a dinosaur died, it wasn't usually in cinematic glory. Most met unremarkable ends: sickness, starvation, floods. The vast majority, their remains were scavenged, scattered, lost to time. Fossils are rare because the process is unforgiving. First, the body had to be buried fast by mud, ash, sand, or silt. No scavengers, no decay. Then groundwater rich in minerals seeped in, replacing organic materials cell by cell. What's left isn't bone anymore. It's stone. A stone in the shape of a memory. Over time, sediment layers pressed down, turning mud into rock. Tectonic shifts lifted those rocks up. Mountains, cliffs, badlands. Wind and rain wore them down again, exposing fragments. A tooth, a claw, a ridge of vertebrae. And then, a human saw it. Maybe it was a sharp eye, maybe it was luck, but someone, usually a field paleontologist, spotted a fossil peeking out of rock and began the long, delicate process of extraction. Brushes, picks, tiny chisels. Hours spent in sun and heat, documenting every grain of dust. Then, packing, transport, preparation in labs, cleaning, imaging, reconstruction, and finally, naming. The names themselves are poetic. Stegosaurus, roof lizard, for its plates. Velociraptor, swift thief, for its speed. Brachiosaurus, arm lizard, for its long front limbs. But every fossil tells more than just a name. It tells a story. A worn tooth, evidence of diet, a healed rib, proof of survival, a nest full of eggs, a window into parenting. And when fossils are found in groups, entire herds, clustered remains, trackways, it paints a picture of behavior, not just what dinosaurs were, but how they lived. One of the most remarkable discoveries, fossilized footprints. Trackways stretch across rock beds like echoes of ancient parades. From them we can estimate speed, gait, social dynamics. One set might show a juvenile running alongside adults. Another might reveal a predator stalking prey. Some are playful, others panicked, each one frozen in time. Then there's the feather fossils. Found in fine-grained lake beds, they preserve the whisper of soft tissue, the curve of a plume, even pigment cells giving us the first real sense of dinosaur coloration. Rust red, smoky grey, maybe even iridescent blues. We're not just guessing anymore, we're reconstructing. Museums display skeletons that look ready to move. Skin impressions let us see textures. CT scans map internal cavities. 3D modeling simulates movement. Fossils have become data, and from that data we build worlds. Fossils tell us about climate, oxygen isotopes hint at temperature swings. Fossilized pollen shows vegetation. Charcoal layers reveal wildfires. Fossils are like receipts from Earth's deep time. But they're also deeply human, because every fossil found is also a fossil interpreted. We see them not just through microscopes, but through curiosity, imagination, even bias. The first reconstructions were laughable. Iguanodon with horns on its nose, tyrannosaurs dragging tails like crocodiles. But as science grew, so did our vision. We realized these creatures were dynamic, warm-blooded, social, sometimes gentle, often terrifying, and always real. That's what makes fossils so powerful. They're not relics, they're testimony. Proof that this world was once profoundly different, and that change is the only constant. You could walk the desert today and step over a femur without knowing it. A piece of a creature that saw its last sunset 90 million years ago. You could sip water filtered through rock that once held dinosaur footprints. You could build a city on top of a graveyard and never know. We live above bones. We build on deep time. Every time you touch a fossil, you touch a moment. Not just an object, a creature's last breath. A forest that burned. A herd that stampeded. And sometimes, when we split a rock and find a perfect fossilized flower, or a dragonfly's wing, or the foot of a hatchling dinosaur curled in sleep, we remember that Earth keeps everything, not because it's sentimental, but because time doesn't erase, it layers. And sometimes, when the sun hits just right, when the wind is still, when an eclipse dims the sky and throws the world into silence, you can almost hear it. Not a roar, not a scream, but a whisper. I was here. Fossils don't just sit quietly in the ground. They rise, they provoke, they ignite imaginations. They change how we see everything, not just Earth's past, but its present, and even its myths. Because long before paleontology was a science, bones told stories, but those stories weren't about dinosaurs, they were about monsters. Let's rewind. Imagine ancient peoples stumbling across a fossilized femur, the size of a log, or a skull with horns, or a spiral shell embedded in stone, with no context for evolution, extinction, or deep time. How would they explain it? Answer: they didn't, they mythologized it. Fossils were seen as dragon bones in China. In Europe they were mistaken for the remains of giants, ogres, even biblical beasts. The Greeks found mammoth skulls and invented the Cyclops, because the central nasal cavity looked like a single massive eye socket. It wasn't until the 17th and 18th centuries that curiosity turned into science. Naturalists began cataloguing bones, trying to piece together creatures that no longer roamed the earth. But it was a slow, often clumsy process. They had the parts, but no instruction manual. Then came Mary Anning. Born in 1799 in Lyme Regis, England, she was the daughter of a cabinet maker. As a teenager, she uncovered the first complete ichthyosaur skeleton, then a plesiosaur, then a pterosaur, then a pterosaur. And she did all this while being female, poor, and mostly self-taught, in a field dominated by upper-class men. Mary didn't just find fossils, she redefined them, and her discoveries laid the groundwork for a fossil revolution. By the 19th century, dinosaurs were finally being understood as a unique group of extinct reptiles. British anatomist Richard Owen coined the term Dinosauria in 1842, meaning terrible lizard. And just like that, the age of dinosaurs had a name. And once it had a name, it had a fan base. The late 1800s saw the Bone Wars, a heated rivalry between paleontologists Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Charles Marsh. They raced to outdiscover, outname, and outfossil each other. The result? Over 130 new species of dinosaurs discovered. Also broken friendships, slander, fossils smashed in the field so the other couldn't have them. Science is messy sometimes. But the dinosaurs were out of the ground and into the spotlight. Museums began building towering skeletons. Life-sized reconstructions amazed Victorian crowds. Children begged for fossil hunting kits. Artists like Charles Knight painted prehistoric worlds, lush, grand, terrifying. And in the 20th century, dinosaurs made their leap into pop culture. Movies like The Lost World, 1925, and King Kong, 1933, introduced stop-motion thunder lizards to audiences. Then came Godzilla, Land Before Time, and of course, Jurassic Park. That one film flipped the world's image of dinosaurs overnight. No longer were they slow, dumb, tail-dragging brutes. They were fast, smart, alive. Science, of course, was ahead of the game. By the 1970s and 80s, a dinosaur renaissance was underway. Paleontologists like Robert Bakker and John H. Ostrom were arguing that dinosaurs were active, warm-blooded, and even bird-like, which, as we now know, is true. Feathers? Confirmed. Warm-bloodedness? In many cases, yes. Parental care? Evidence says absolutely. The public, initially skeptical, began to fall in love with a new kind of dinosaur. Not monsters, animals. Complex, beautiful, real. Today, dinosaurs are everywhere, from toys to textbooks, video games to virtual reality. Children can name more species than most adults. New discoveries are announced monthly. And it's not just in North America. China's Liaojian Province has revealed feathered fossils with unparalleled detail. Argentina and Patagonia keep unearthing some of the largest land animals ever found. Mongolia's Gobi Desert continues to provide desert-preserved treasure troves. Every continent, including Antarctica, has yielded dinosaur remains. The story of the Mesozoic isn't locked in stone. It's being updated constantly. And with each fossil, the line between past and present thins. We don't just study dinosaurs anymore. We study how they changed the Earth, how they adapted, how they fell, and how their bones became bridges between science and storytelling. Think about it. We dig up creatures that lived 100 million years ago. We reconstruct them from pieces. We draw them, animate them, argue about them. We care about them. Why? Because they remind us of our own fragility, of how ecosystems rise and fall, of how nothing, no matter how big, strong, or armored, is immune to change. And yet, they also remind us of resilience, because birds still fly, and fossils still rise from the dust, sometimes in deserts, sometimes in cliffs, sometimes during an eclipse when the light bends just right and a glint in the stone captures a paleontologist's eye. A shape, a texture, a memory. You live on a familiar planet, blue oceans, green forests, frozen poles, swirling weather. But during the Mesozoic, Earth was unrecognizable, not just in its creatures, but in its shape, its smell, its breath. Let's start from the top. At the beginning of the Mesozoic, around 252 million years ago, there wasn't a patchwork of continents. There was Pangaea, a single colossal landmass stretching almost pole to pole, shaped like a flattened bean. Imagine walking from present-day New York to Morocco without ever crossing water. This wasn't just a geographical curiosity, it was a climatic monster. With so much landmass and so little coastline, Pangaea had extreme weather. The interior was scorching and dry like a global Arizona. Deserts dominated. Rain had a hard time reaching the center. No lush rainforest, no icy tundras, just endless stretches of sun-baked plains. But Earth doesn't stand still. Over the course of the Mesozoic, Pangaea began to break apart. First, it cracked down the middle into Laurasia north and Gondwana south. Then, piece by piece, modern continents began to drift apart, slowly, relentlessly, pushed by the invisible gears of plate tectonics. This drifting changed everything. New coastlines formed, new seas flooded land, islands appeared, mountains rose, ocean currents shifted, wind patterns changed. By the Cretaceous, the world looked almost familiar. North America had an inland sea. Europe was a series of tropical islands. India was a rogue continent speeding toward Asia. And Antarctica. Forested and warm. Yes, at the time Antarctica wasn't frozen. It was covered in coniferous trees, ferns, and flowering plants. Dinosaurs lived there in long summer days and twilight winters. Let's talk about climate. The Mesozoic was a greenhouse Earth, hotter, wetter, and with no polar ice caps. Average temperatures were higher than today's. Carbon dioxide levels were through the roof, sometimes 4 to 10 times modern levels. This meant no glacial cycles, higher sea levels, more shallow seas inland, a global tropic zone stretching far from the equator. There were storms the size of modern continents. And the air? Different too. Oxygen levels varied, sometimes lower than now, sometimes higher. In the late Jurassic, oxygen may have reached 35%. compared to our current 21%. That much oxygen changes everything. Insects grow larger, fires burn hotter, respiration gets supercharged. It was a world of thicker atmosphere, stronger convection currents, deeper cloud layers, and it affected how creatures evolved. Let's not forget the magnetic field. Earth's magnetic poles reversed multiple times during the Mesozoic, like flipping a giant planetary battery. We still don't fully understand the biological effects, but it might have impacted migratory patterns, aurora activity, or radiation exposure. Also, volcanism. The Mesozoic was littered with massive volcanic events. The Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, one of the largest volcanic events in Earth's history, coincided with the end Triassic extinction. Later, the Deccan Traps erupted in what's now India. Millions of cubic kilometers of lava flowed, releasing CO2 and sulfur dioxide. These eruptions didn't just belch lava, they altered the climate, triggered acid rain, blocked sunlight, spurred evolutionary bottlenecks and rebounds. In short, the ground beneath dinosaurs' feet was alive. Now let's talk oceans. The arrangement of continents meant that ocean basins were shaped differently. Tethys Sea, now long gone, dominated the equator. Coral reefs formed in new configurations. Warm water circulated in broader loops, keeping global temperatures elevated. Marine life flourished in these warm, shallow seas. And let's not forget the sky. With different continental arrangements, weather patterns shifted dramatically. Wind currents, monsoons, and cloud belts weren't where we find them now. Even storm tracks followed different rhythms. And the stars, seen from different latitudes, different positions, constellations might have looked warped, alien, as continents slowly moved across the curvature of the planet. Now, imagine standing on a Mesozoic coastline. You look inland, dense cycads and conifers. You hear insects the size of birds. You see a sauropod moving like a living crane in the haze. You turn to the sea, warm, green, frothy with plankton. Pterosaurs swoop and dive. And then, the light dims. An eclipse begins. In that moment, the wind slows, the air shifts, a stillness falls over the entire landscape. Even the great beasts pause. Because this world isn't just ancient, it's alive in ways ours no longer is. The air is thicker, the forests smell sharper, the earth hums beneath your feet. It's not just that the creatures were different. The planet was, and somehow we still walk the same soil. Different continents, different skies, same earth. Just turned over, evolved, waiting. Dinosaurs didn't just walk across the earth, they transformed it. When we picture them, we often imagine creatures moving through a passive world, forests unchanged, skies untouched, rivers oblivious. But that's the wrong lens. Dinosaurs were ecosystem engineers, living forces of geology, botany, and climate. They changed landscapes, they altered soil, they drove evolution forward like bulldozers made of bone. Let's dig into how. Start with the sauropods, those long-necked titans like Brachiosaurus, Argentinosaurus, and Diplodocus. These weren't just the largest land animals to ever live, they were biome shapers. A single sauropod could eat hundreds of pounds of plant matter per day. In herds, they were like living hurricanes of consumption. Whole forests were shaped by their eating habits. High-browsing sauropods likely cleared the canopy. Low-browsing grazed ferns and cycads like massive lawnmowers. Their footsteps alone compacted soil, rerouted waterways, and carved out trails that smaller animals used for migration and shelter. They uprooted trees. They spread seeds through dung the size of bathtubs. And speaking of dung, yes, even their waste shaped the world. Dino dung, coprolites fertilized soils, fed insects, and nurtured early flowering plants. Some scientists believe dinosaur droppings helped encourage the spread of angiosperms, which were rising fast in the late Cretaceous. That's right. Poop helped invent flowers. Now let's talk about predators. Tyrannosaurs weren't just eating machines, they were regulators. By controlling herbivore populations, they prevented overgrazing, kept ecosystems in balance, and influenced herd behavior. Apex predators create pressure, pressure creates innovation. Prey species had to get smarter, faster, more social. Herding behaviors, alarm calls, speed. Over time, that arms race of predator versus prey reshaped the animal kingdom itself. Even smaller theropods like raptors and oviraptors played their part. They weren't just hunters, they were brooders, builders, possibly even tree climbers. Some dug burrows, others constructed nests. They changed how soil was moved, how underbrush was trampled, how insects evolved. Then there were the hadrosaurs. These duck-billed dinosaurs weren't just numbers in herds, they were ecological indicators. They moved in massive migratory groups, spreading plant seeds across continents. Their movement patterns may have helped forests spread into new regions like nomadic gardeners trampling and fertilizing as they went. And they talked. Their hollow crests weren't just decorative. They amplified sound, long, bellowing calls across valleys. Communication shaped social structure. Structure shaped behavior. Behavior shaped land use. Let's not forget the diggers. Small ornithischians, early mammals, and even some non-dinosaur reptiles were incredible burrowers. Their constant movement loosened soil, brought nutrients to the surface, and helped form early topsoil layers, essential for new plant life. Then there's the effect dinosaurs had on climate. We don't mean they controlled the weather, although that would be cool, but collectively they influenced the carbon cycle. Large plant eaters processed tons of carbon-rich plant material. Their respiration, digestion, and waste all cycled carbon, methane, and nitrogen back into the atmosphere and soil, and their decay when they died further enriched the earth. Every fallen body fed scavengers, decomposers, and eventually, the dirt. Even in death, they fed the future. Their bones became calcium sources. Their nests altered terrain. Their migration paths left physical scars that fossilized into dino highways. Over millions of years, all of this contributed to the rise of new ecosystems, many of which persisted into the Cenozoic. Even after the asteroid, Earth remembered the shape of dinosaurs. Some scientists argue that certain modern environments, savannas, plains, tropical forests, still bear the footprint of dinosaur influence. Because evolution doesn't start over, it builds. And once something as big as a diplodocus walks through your garden, the garden's never the same. One of the most surprising ways dinosaurs shaped the Earth. Geological sediment layers, mass dinosaur die-offs, nesting grounds, migration corridors, all these events left behind layers of fossil-rich sediment. These strata act as markers in the Earth's crust, time capsules that record not just the dinosaurs, but their climate, food, and interactions. They're not just bones, they're bookmarks in Earth's history. Finally, consider this. Dinosaurs shaped us. Not just culturally, literally. Had the asteroid not hit, mammals may never have risen, primates may never have evolved, no apes, no humans, no cities. We were born in their absence, but we live in their shadow. Every forest trail, every mountaintop, every scoop of soil carries their influence. And sometimes, when the sky dims and a sudden eclipse casts ancient light across the land, we get a glimpse of the Earth as they knew it, not as a backdrop, but as a masterpiece they helped paint. The Mesozoic gave us giants, thunder-footed sauropods, razor-toothed tyrants, clawed nightmares stalking through undergrowth. But hidden in the margins, perched on branches and darting through ferns, something smaller and perhaps more miraculous was taking shape. Feathers. They weren't just for birds, they weren't just for flight, they were for survival, and they started long before anything took wing. Let's rewind. Fossils from China's Liaoning province cracked everything open in the 1990s. There, in impossibly delicate rock layers, paleontologists found dinosaurs with feathers, soft, filamentous proto-feathers, not attached to birds, attached to raptors, theropods. And it wasn't just one, it was dozens. Sinosauropteryx was one of the first, a small, meat-eating dinosaur, barely a meter long, with a long tail and a fine halo of proto-feathers. And here's the kicker, scientists could even see pigmentation patterns in the feathers, evidence it had a striped, possibly reddish-brown tail. Color, texture, pattern. This wasn't Jurassic Park. This was real. Feathers weren't some late-game addition. They were ancient. So why did they evolve? Flight? Not at first. The earliest feathers were likely used for insulation. Think fur, but fancier. Feathers kept body heat in, especially useful for warm-blooded creatures. Later they became useful for display. Bright colours, fluffy crests, tail fans, courtship and intimidation. Sound familiar? Birds still do it. Only after all that, millions of years later, did feathers evolve for aerodynamics. Gliding, then flapping, then powered flight. The line between bird and dinosaur didn't just blur, it disappeared. Let's talk Archaeopteryx. Once considered the first bird, Archaeopteryx lived during the late Jurassic, about 150 million years ago. It had full flight feathers, a wishbone and wings, but also teeth, a long bony tail and claws on its hands. It was a transitional fossil, a bridge between ground-dwelling theropods and sky-soaring birds. And it wasn't alone. Other feathered dinosaurs like Microraptor had 4 wings, feathers on their arms and legs, allowing them to glide like flying squirrels on steroids. Even Velociraptor, pop culture's favourite death lizard, had quill knobs on its forearms, attachment points for feathers. Yes, Velociraptors were feathered. They probably looked less like crocodiles and more like angry turkeys with switchblades. The truth is, birds didn't evolve from dinosaurs. Birds are dinosaurs. They are the last surviving branch of Theropoda, the same group that gave us T-Rex. That makes robins more closely related to Tyrannosaurus than to any lizard on Earth. Wrap your brain around that. Even today you can trace the evolutionary path. Hollow bones, lighter weight for speed, and eventually, flight. 3-toed limbs, found in both theropods and birds. Wishbone furcula, supports flight muscles in birds, seen in non-avian dinosaurs. Air sacs. Modern birds use a one-way airflow system. Signs of similar respiratory structures exist in theropods. Nesting behavior. Many dinosaurs brooded their eggs, just like birds. The connection is deep, structural, behavioral, genetic. Birds still use beaks, refined tools evolved from toothed jaws. They still lay eggs just like their scaly ancestors. They still do mating dances, form pair bonds, build nests, and sing. Even their sleeping posture, head tucked under wing, matches fossils of small theropods. Birds are living fossils, tiny flapping time machines. And when you watch one take off from a tree branch, you're watching a continuation of a story that began over 150 million years ago. Not a sequel. A survivor. Today, birds are everywhere. Over 10,000 species. They've adapted to every biome. Oceans, deserts, tundras, forests, cities. They've filled niches left vacant by pterosaurs. They've evolved into hummingbirds that hover like helicopters and albatrosses that glide across entire oceans. Some birds can mimic speech. Others use tools. Some pass down songs from generation to generation, culture, not just instinct. They aren't just impressive for animals. They're impressive, period. And their legacy? Etched into every fossil feather, every amber-preserved wing, every print left behind in the sand. When we look at a fossil of a feathered raptor, we're not just seeing a dinosaur. We're seeing the spark of flight, the future of song, the origin of that seagull that steals your fries at the beach. So next time you see a sparrow fluffing itself on a fence post, or a hawk circling a thermal, or a penguin waddling like it owns the world, don't think of them as just birds. Think of them as dinosaurs in disguise. And maybe, just maybe, they remember, in the curl of their claws, in the tilt of their heads, in the hush of twilight, as the light dims and the eclipse comes. They remember the world before the fall, before the first dinosaur ever hatched from its leathery egg, before claws raked mud and tails swept ferns, before the Mesozoic's thundering chaos unfolded. Earth had to become the kind of place where dinosaurs could exist at all. The dinosaurs didn't just appear, they were a response, an evolutionary reply to an Earth that had been violently reset. The Mesozoic era, after all, didn't begin with a bang of life. It began with a mass extinction, one so thorough, so unforgiving, it's nicknamed the Great Dying. Roughly 252 million years ago, the Permian period ended with a cataclysm. Volcanic eruptions in what's now Siberia spewed enough lava and gas to coat entire continents. Carbon dioxide and methane were released in vast amounts, spiking global temperatures. Acid rain poisoned land and sea. Oceans stagnated, oxygen levels plummeted, and up to 96% of all marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species vanished. It was the most devastating extinction event in Earth's history. That's how the Mesozoic era began. A clean slate drenched in ash. In the aftermath, the Earth was eerily quiet. The once vibrant ecosystems, coral reefs, lush forests, teeming seas were gutted. But what followed was opportunity. The dominant reptiles of the Permian were largely gone, and so in the Triassic, new forms of life crawled out from the metaphorical rubble. The Triassic period was wild, raw, and filled with experimentation. It was a chaotic evolutionary gold rush. Amphibians rebounded, then waned. Early archosaurs, the group that would eventually branch into both crocodiles and dinosaurs, began to multiply and diversify. The Earth was hot, dry, and largely united into one megacontinent, Pangaea. The climate created deserts the size of countries. Rain came rarely, in violent seasonal bursts. Forests were sparse. Lakes evaporated and reformed in cycles of geologic heartbeat. But these conditions were perfect for a particular kind of creature. Fast, efficient, and adaptable. Enter the early dinosaurs. They didn't begin as titans. Far from it. The first dinosaurs were small, bipedal, and nimble. Creatures like Eoraptor and Herolosaurus ran on two legs, hunted insects and small reptiles, and used agility, not brute strength, to survive. They were part of a crowded field, competing with early crocodilians and mammal-like reptiles. What gave dinosaurs their edge? Locomotion, for one. Walking upright with limbs positioned directly under the body gave them energy efficiency and better speed. Their hips were built for it. Their lungs may have been more advanced than their peers, with possible air sac systems allowing for high endurance. They could travel farther, run longer, and colonize more diverse environments. And then there was luck. Around 201 million years ago, at the end of the Triassic, another extinction hit, smaller than the Great Dying but still brutal. It wiped out many of the early competitors, mammal-like reptiles, other reptilian clades, even some early amphibians. This left vast ecological niches wide open, and the dinosaurs filled them. Fast. This was their big break. The Jurassic followed like a curtain rising on a new stage. The Earth warmed, rain increased, forests spread. The land, once barren, became lush. Giant ferns, cycads, and conifers created dense green labyrinths. Oxygen levels rose, herbivores exploded in size and number. Sauropods, those necky skyscrapers, emerged and stretched their reach skyward. And with the herbivores came the predators. Theropods diversified, some evolving stronger jaws, others longer legs, some even developing proto-feathers. The arms race began. By the Cretaceous, the world had become a dinosaur factory. But this explosion of dinosaurian diversity didn't just happen because Earth was generous. Earth was unstable, and that instability drove innovation. The continents began to drift apart. Pangaea fractured slowly, tectonically, over millions of years. Laurasia in the north, Gondwana in the south. The Atlantic Ocean began as a crack in a supercontinent and widened into a basin. These new geographic separations created isolated ecosystems, and isolated ecosystems create evolutionary laboratories. Different dinosaurs evolved on different continents, now cut off by rising seas and spreading forests. You got armored dinosaurs in one region, long-necked behemoths in another, duck-billed herbivores in yet another. Every landmass was telling its own story, sculpting its own cast of characters. But Earth's influence wasn't just continental, it was vertical. From the skies to the soils, everything was shifting. Volcanic eruptions dotted the Mesozoic. They didn't just blanket the land in ash, they affected atmospheric composition, periods of warming, periods of acid rain. Soil chemistry changed. Some plants thrived in volcanic soils, others didn't. Dinosaurs that adapted to these shifts outlived those that didn't. Earth's magnetic poles flipped multiple times, disrupting migration and possibly climate. Mountain ranges formed, redirecting rivers, creating rain shadows, and forcing animal migrations. Each of these shifts, each tectonic groan, each sea level change, altered what it meant to be a successful dinosaur. And so dinosaurs changed with it. Sauropods developed longer necks and stronger hearts to graze from tree to tree. Theropods grew faster, smarter, sharper. Ceratopsians developed horns, frills, and beaks to handle the varied flora of the changing land. Dinosaur evolution was never static. It was a conversation with the Earth. And Earth was a difficult partner, generous with resources, yes, but also moody, shaking, burning, flooding, drying. Every few million years it threw a wrench into the biological machine. The only constant was change. And through all of it, the dinosaurs responded, not with resistance, but with reinvention. Even flowering plants, the most disruptive botanical event of the Cretaceous, were likely co-evolving with herbivorous dinosaurs. Some scientists believe that hadrosaurs and other plant eaters helped spread flowering plants via seed dispersal, even encouraging their growth through selective feeding. Flowers changed insect behavior, insects changed pollination, pollination changed plant evolution, and dinosaurs were in the middle of all of it. Let's not forget the impact of massive inland seas. By the late Cretaceous, North America had been split by the western interior seaway. Dinosaurs on each side evolved in isolation. Marine reptiles dominated the sea. Pterosaurs ruled the skies above. Coral reefs stretched into sunlit shallows filled with ammonites and filter feeders. The Mesozoic was not just an age of land giants. It was a time when every layer of Earth was brimming with life and complexity. Even the night sky was different. Due to the shifting positions of the continents, the visible constellations were subtly altered. Seasons were affected by Earth's changing tilt and orbit. Day lengths were shorter in the early Mesozoic. Earth spun faster then, and gradually lengthened as time wore on. Every aspect of Earth was moving, breathing, becoming. That's the most astonishing part. Dinosaurs didn't merely inherit Earth. They co-created the world we live in now. Their steps shaped sediments. Their migrations altered biomes. Their evolution was not parallel to Earth's changes. It was entwined with them. And when the asteroid finally came, it didn't just erase them. It shattered a system built over hundreds of millions of years, an intricate, beautiful, messy collaboration between biology and geology. But echoes of that system remain in the birds that fly above us, in the soil beneath our feet, in the rocks that tell the stories of those days, and sometimes in the strange silence of a solar eclipse when day turns to dusk and the light dims without warning, and the animals pause not in fear but in memory. We get a glimpse of that old world. We remember, not just that dinosaurs lived, but that they once shaped the Earth itself. Before the age of cities, before satellites, before lenses and optics, there were still eclipses. They didn't wait for human eyes. They didn't need them. Eclipses are older than civilization, older than language. They are as ancient as the moon's orbit and the Earth's spin. And during the Mesozoic, they were already happening. Picture it, a vast open plain, dotted with cycads and low-lying ferns. Somewhere near a meandering river, a herd of hadrosaurs grazes under a blistering Cretaceous sun. The sky is thick with moisture. Pterosaurs wheel overhead like kites held aloft by warm air currents. The world is teeming alive, loud, layered. Then suddenly, the light begins to change. The sun, that unrelenting furnace in the sky, dims, not with clouds, but with something more deliberate, more silent. The shadows grow long. The color drains from the grass. Animals pause. Insects go quiet. A hush spreads like mist. A total solar eclipse begins. And in that moment, the Cretaceous Earth holds its breath. No creature understands why the sun is being eaten. There is no mythology, no prophecy, only instinct. Perhaps the hadrosaurs cluster closer. Perhaps a lone Tyrannosaurus stalking prey hesitates, uncertain why his shadow has vanished. Birds, the direct descendants of dinosaurs, still react to eclipses today, falling silent, roosting, treating the sudden twilight as nightfall. If they do this now, what did their ancestors feel? Because these moments, brief as they are, were not rare. Eclipses occur with rhythmic certainty, governed by the gravitational dance between the Earth, Moon, and Sun. And while the Moon's orbit has shifted slightly over millions of years, total solar eclipses were absolutely part of the dinosaur experience. In fact, during the Mesozoic, eclipses might have occurred more frequently and lasted longer. Here's why. The Moon was closer to the Earth. About 250 million years ago, the Moon was roughly 2,000 miles closer than it is now. That meant it appeared larger in the sky and moved faster across the Earth's surface, casting a wider shadow during eclipses. The duration of totality could stretch for 7 or even 8 minutes, enveloping the land in a darkness as complete and unsettling as nightfall. For dinosaurs whose behavior was deeply tied to light, this would have been momentous. A sudden shift from blazing daylight to a surreal dusk in the middle of the day would not have gone unnoticed. Diurnal animals might have frozen, nocturnal species confused, might have stirred from hiding. Even plants. Yes, plants can respond to sudden light changes. Some flowers close, some leaves fold. The ecosystem flickers like a light bulb. For a few moments, the Mesozoic becomes a ghost world. And then, just as swiftly, it ends. The light returns, slowly, golden, hesitant, like a forgotten memory. The sun reclaims the sky, the pterosaurs resume their lazy glide, the Tyrannosaurus moves again, perhaps unaware that time just hiccuped around him. But what if not all dinosaurs were unaware? This is where we let imagination peek in through the cracks of science. Certain animals today can sense changes in barometric pressure, magnetic fields, and even ultraviolet light. Birds can see polarized light. Elephants can feel low-frequency rumbles through their feet. Whales use echolocation to map their world. Could dinosaurs have had senses we don't understand? Could some species, perhaps certain small theropods or high-sensory herbivores, have been aware that something extraordinary was happening? And if so, did they fear it? Or did they, like some animals today, ritualize it? Birds flock, primates watch the sky. Even humans in ancient times built entire monuments. Stonehenge, Chaco Canyon, the pyramids of Egypt and Mesoamerica, aligned with solar and lunar events. But long before humans looked up, dinosaurs looked up. Their eyes were massive, especially in predator species. A Tyrannosaurus had eyes the size of grapefruits. Dinosaurs likely had acute vision, some capable of seeing in low light or tracking motion at incredible distances. Imagine how a total eclipse looked through such eyes. Not dim, not subtle, but seismic. The sun vanishes. The temperature drops. A chorus of chirps and hoots ends in silence. Even the wind dies down. In that pause, the entire Earth seems to wait. Eclipses were more than astronomical events. They were natural resets, moments of pause in the relentless march of sunlight and time. And they happened repeatedly, generation after generation, across the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. They witnessed the rise of the first dinosaurs. They passed over the great herds of sauropods. They shadowed the flocks of feathered raptors. They fell, dark and silent, across the world during the final days before the asteroid's arrival. That's the haunting part. There may have been a solar eclipse days before the impact event at Chicxulub. Maybe one passed over the Yucatan Peninsula. Maybe a dinosaur looked up from its nesting site as the sun winked out, a brief, beautiful darkness before the permanent one. And then the light returned, for the last time. The asteroid struck. But eclipses didn't stop. Even in the post-impact darkness, as ash filled the skies and firestorms raged across continents, the Earth's orbit carried on. The moon still circled, the shadows still fell. After the fires went out and the clouds began to clear, the first survivors, small birds, burrowing mammals, hardy amphibians, saw sunlight return. And eventually, another eclipse. A new world, a new sky. Same rhythm. The legacy of these ancient shadows doesn't end with the Mesozoic. In fact, it connects us. Every total eclipse we witness today, every time we put on those ridiculous paper glasses and gaze up at the darkened sky, we're experiencing the same phenomenon that passed over the dinosaurs. Not a metaphor. the same mechanical cosmic event, the same alignment, the same silence. When you watch an eclipse, you're staring into a moment your ancestors experienced, not your human ancestors, your deep-time lineage, the creatures whose bones became fossils, the raptors who perched in trees, the long-necked herbivores who slowed their chewing, the flying pterosaurs who circled beneath a vanishing sun. You are part of the same story, the same Earth, the same moon, the same shadow. Think about that. When the next eclipse comes, and it will, step outside. Watch how the animals around you react. Notice the birds, the dogs, the insects. Notice your own pulse. The air feels heavier. The light turns strange. People speak in whispers. And maybe for a moment you'll feel it. Not fear, not confusion, but awe. The same awe the dinosaurs might have felt when the world briefly forgot how to shine. That moment before science, before explanation, before language, is ancient, and it's still with us. Eclipses are the punctuation marks of Earth's deep time, cosmic commas in the sentence of sunlight, ancient parentheses around the Mesozoic story. And yes, they were everywhere. You wanted more eclipses, good, because in the Mesozoic they were practically a recurring character. Every few years, like clockwork, the moon slid between Earth and sun, casting its inky shadow over herds of horned giants, snaking rivers filled with crocodilomorphs, forests alive with calls of distant feathered creatures. Total eclipses blanketed deserts, mountains, seas. Everywhere dinosaurs roamed, an eclipse had passed above, and not just passed, impressed. Let's paint it vividly. Imagine a group of Camarasaurus slowly chewing low-hanging conifer fronds in a Jurassic basin. The heat is sweltering. The buzzing of insects is a constant background drone. Their skin, thick and pebbled, glistens with prehistoric dust and pollen. Then it happens. The sunlight softens. The colors fade, not to black, but to a surreal shade of violet-gray. Shadows sharpen. The wind shifts. Birds, protobirds, early coelurosaurs perched in branches above fall silent. Even insects drop in pitch, some vanishing completely. A high-pitched whine of planetary tension seems to fill the air, and as the moon's shadow rushes over the land, traveling at nearly 2,000 kilometers per hour, it swallows everything in a dome of silence and dusk. A total eclipse, one of countless, but never unremarkable. The Camarasaurus freeze, eyes wide, for creatures who've survived flash floods, predator ambushes, volcanic eruptions. This gets their attention. Because the light isn't just changing, it's being stolen. And for a brief few minutes, under the eerie hush of midday night, everything, the plants, the prey, the predators, waits. Now zoom forward a few million years. On the edge of a Cretaceous lagoon, a Pachycephalosaurus herd huddles near the water's edge. Juveniles wrestle, adults wade through soft mud. Overhead, pterosaurs coast in thermals, calling in bursts of sharp prehistoric cackles. Again the eclipse arrives. Only this time, it's annular. The moon is just far enough in its elliptical orbit that it doesn't fully block the sun, creating a ring of fire in the sky, a glowing halo of solar fury, more intense, more surreal. Light seeps around the edges, shadows become crisp, strange, fragmented. It's not night, but it's not day either. It's like the sky doesn't know what to do. Even the water stills. And this repeats, over and over. The Triassic, the Jurassic, the Cretaceous. Eclipses passed over sauropod nests, raptor hunts, ankylosaur wallows. They reflected off the backs of mosasaurs as they breached warm inland seas. They painted shadows across feathered wings. It's not romanticism, it's orbital mechanics. Eclipses occurred then, just as they do now, shaped by the celestial geometry of a moon orbiting Earth, Earth orbiting the sun. The difference? Back then the moon was closer, meaning the umbra, or full shadow, was wider, and totality lasted longer. Some of the longest eclipses in Earth's history happened during the Mesozoic. 8 full minutes. That's a long time when you're a creature that doesn't understand astronomy. And these weren't just local events. Eclipses swept across the entire planet. They passed over early mammalian burrows, silent crocodilian lairs, lush fern fields, volcanic ridges, and the shifting coastlines of splitting continents. They weren't rare, they were woven into the rhythm of Mesozoic life. There's a theory, unconfirmed but tantalizing, that some ancient species may have been attuned to these patterns. We know some modern animals react dramatically to eclipses. Baboons panic, whales dive, birds flock, and then vanish. Tortoises stop mid-mating. Seriously. Now imagine a world where these celestial events were uninterrupted by artificial light. No cities, no satellites, no headlights, just pure raw nature. Eclipses then were cleaner, more immersive. Dinosaurs experienced them fully, as moments when the very laws of reality seemed to bend. Even the geological record might bear subtle traces. Fossilized nesting grounds from some species show clear gaps in egg-laying. Could these pauses align with solar eclipses? Could sudden changes in animal behavior, predator-prey dynamics, or migration routes have been influenced by these fleeting phenomena? It's possible, it's unproven, but it's not unreasonable. Now let's talk about cultural continuity. Humans, hundreds of millions of years later, still treat eclipses with reverence. We've feared them, celebrated them, predicted them with terrifying accuracy. From Babylonian astronomers to Mayan priests, from Stonehenge alignments to NASA supercomputers, we've traced the shadow. But dinosaurs didn't need math. They had the moment. They had the instinct. They had millions of years of experience watching day turn to dusk, sky turn to fire, and then, without warning, the world returned to normal. Imagine the first bird, perhaps a species like Confucius ornis, perched high in a treetop during a total eclipse. Feathers fluffed, neck craned, waiting, watching. Some birds today go silent, retreat to nests, or initiate premature roosting. If modern birds inherit even fragments of behavior from their dinosaurian ancestors, then we can assume that even during the Mesozoic, creatures reacted to eclipses. They adjusted. They learned. They lived through thousands of them. Some perhaps were even born during one. And that's the poetic part. Every Mesozoic eclipse was a shared experience felt by multiple species across multiple continents. For a few minutes, predator and prey stood under the same shadow, blinking at the same fading sun. They didn't understand it, but they remembered it. Not in stories, not in writing, in behavior, in genetics, in instinct. And when the big one came, the asteroid that ended it all, perhaps, just perhaps, an eclipse had passed weeks or months before, maybe even the day before. One final rehearsal for a darkness that wouldn't lift for years. And yet, eclipses continued. After the fire, after the death, as the earth cooled and healed, as the clouds lifted, and the mammals rose, and the forests regrew, the moon still danced its orbit, the shadows still fell. And today, we stand under that same sky. We watch, we marvel, we hush our voices, we feel the temperature drop. And for a brief moment, during totality, we are connected through time, through biology, through light and shadow, to the dinosaurs, to their eyes scanning a dimming horizon, to their feet stilling on the grass, to the silence that falls across every species, every age, every biome, when the light dies and the world forgets its own name, and then remembers. The Mesozoic wasn't a static stage upon which dinosaurs strutted and roared. It was a restless, trembling, breathing world in constant transformation. The continents weren't locked in their modern shapes. The climate didn't stay still. The seas advanced and retreated like tides on a cosmic scale. Everything moved. Everything changed. And dinosaurs, those towering, thundering icons, didn't just adapt. They thrived in the chaos. Let's rewind to the Triassic, the opening act. The Earth was still reeling from the Great Dying, its worst mass extinction. Only a sliver of species had survived, and they inherited a shattered world. The supercontinent Pangaea stretched nearly from pole to pole, a cracked stone shell hugging the equator. Across its vast deserts and scrublands, evolution got creative. Archosaurs, crocodile-line reptiles, and the earliest dinosaurs began their climb. At first, the difference between the two wasn't dramatic. They were cousins, competitors, often occupying similar niches. But slowly, the dinosaurs pulled ahead. Why? Because Earth changed. Pangaea didn't just sit there. It cracked. Fault lines spread like spiderwebs across its surface. Volcanic rifts tore through what is now the Atlantic Ocean. Lava surged up. New oceans whispered into existence. Plate tectonics began their slow shuffle, sending the land masses drifting apart. As Pangaea fractured, climates diversified. Wind patterns changed. Rainfall became uneven. Humid pockets emerged in once arid zones. The dinosaurs, lightweight, efficient, and versatile, surged into these new environments. Their success wasn't inevitable. It was earned, one adaptation at a time. The Jurassic brought the real boom. Now the continents were splitting in earnest. What had been a single landmass was becoming Laurasia in the north, and Gondwana in the south. Between them, new seaways shimmered, carrying warm water and feeding clouds. Where deserts had once dominated, now there were fern prairies, conifer forests, and tangled undergrowth. And that's where the giants arrived. Sauropods like Diplodocus, Apatosaurus, and Brachiosaurus rose like moving hills, lumbering across open plains that had never known creatures of their scale. They didn't just pass through the land, they remade it. Their weight compressed soil. Their necks cleared canopies. Their migrations shaped the land like rivers shape canyons. And behind them came the predators. Allosaurus, the Jurassic apex hunter, didn't just feast on meat, it followed the pulse of prey herds, mapping their movement like a shadow. Its skull was built for slashing, not crushing, an executioner, not a bludgeoner. The Earth responded. As the sauropods grew taller and heavier, new types of plants evolved to outlast them. Thicker trunks, resinous sap, defensive adaptations. As predators evolved keener senses, herbivores evolved thicker armor, better hearing, and herding instincts. Even insects joined the arms race, pollinators following early flowering plants, burrowers helping aerate the soil and decompose dung the size of modern sofas. The skies were no longer empty. Pterosaurs filled them, not dinosaurs but flying reptiles, the first vertebrates to conquer the air. Some were small as sparrows, others had wingspans rivaling fighter jets, and still, Earth evolved beneath them. By the time the Cretaceous rolled in, the Earth was fully rearranged. The Atlantic Ocean had split North America from Europe. Africa and South America were parting ways. India was hurtling north on a collision course with Asia. Australia drifted into isolation. The Earth's geography had been rewritten, and with it came the most biologically explosive period in dinosaur history. The Cretaceous was the age of specialization. Dinosaurs diversified into every available niche. In the north, the duck-billed hadrosaurs flourished, crested, horned, flat-faced, whistling through nasal passages like ancient saxophones. They roamed in herds by the hundreds, some forming complex social structures. Alongside them came the ceratopsians, horned, frilled tanks like Triceratops, Styracosaurus and Pachyrhinosaurus. They weren't slow, they weren't dumb. They were ornamented warriors combining display, defense, and tribal recognition in skulls heavier than motorcycles. Meanwhile, the raptors, smaller, feathered, ferociously clever, evolved into dozens of forms. Some hunted in packs, some may have scavenged, some may have built nests, warmed eggs, raised young. Their cousins? Learning to fly. The first true birds had arrived. Archaeopteryx, once thought the first bird, was joined by more derived species, better flyers, faster flappers, nest builders with refined feathers and lighter bones. They were still dinosaurs, just leaner, quicker, closer to the sky. The Earth kept shifting. Volcanism remained active. Massive eruptions in what would become India, the Deccan Traps, spilled lava for hundreds of thousands of years, pumping ash and gas into the atmosphere. The climate wobbled, rainfall changed, wildfires raged. And then there were the inland seas. In North America, the western interior seaway split the continent in two. Where today you might find Nebraska or Kansas, you would have found coral reefs, ammonites, plesiosaurs, and occasionally drowned dinosaurs swept out to sea. Shorelines teemed with life. Crocodilians, turtles, early mammals. Salt flats shimmered in the sun. and overhead, total solar eclipses fell across every corner of the land. Yes, still, always. Thousands upon thousands of eclipses darkened the Mesozoic skies, each one unique, some total, some partial, some annular, like rings of fire hung in the clouds. Every few years a continent would be cloaked in sudden eerie twilight. Every decade a region would fall silent beneath a full shadow. No matter how much the earth moved, no matter how many mountains rose or oceans widened, the eclipse came, over volcanoes and valleys, over jungles and deserts, over nests and hunting grounds, over dinosaurs big and small, toothed and beaked, scaly and feathered. It was a constant amid chaos, and Earth was never still. Even time itself felt different. The days were slightly shorter in the early Mesozoic. Earth's spin was just a bit faster. The moon, a little closer. Its pull, a little stronger. The tides more dramatic. These shifts didn't just shape coastlines, they shaped behavior, migration, reproduction, even extinction. Because with every tremor of Earth's crust, every burst of magma, every slide of continents across the mantle, ecosystems shifted, old ones vanished, new ones emerged, and life relentless, stubborn, beautiful life followed. Until, of course, the end. But not yet. There was still time. More species to evolve, more forests to expand, more herds to move, and more eclipses to cast their timeless shadows over a world spinning faster than we can imagine. The Mesozoic wasn't just a time of giants. It was a world always in motion, always reshaping itself, always challenging life to adapt, specialize, diversify, survive. And for over 180 million years, dinosaurs did exactly that. Under shifting continents in rising seas, through volcanic winters, and beneath eclipses ancient and frequent, they didn't just live, they thrived. It didn't begin with fire, or ash, or a cosmic roar. The final days of the Mesozoic era might have looked strangely normal. Herds of Edmontosaurus wandered along river deltas, chewing lazily through thick ferns, tails swaying with that casual rhythm that only comes from ruling the world. Juvenile Triceratops nuzzled each other near nesting grounds, under watchful eyes and curved horns that had faced down predators for generations. Above them, the skies were never empty. Quetzalcoatlus, the giraffe-sized pterosaur with wings wide as a bus, glided silently through the thermals. On branches, Avamimus clucked and preened. Dacatoraptor, feathers rippling in the wind, prowled the undergrowth with a slow, confident step. And somewhere, beyond the horizon, the moon began its crawl. The stage was still set for life, but the curtain was already descending. Let's step back just a little. The Earth, even in its last Cretaceous chapter, was still changing, still humming with tectonic movement, still reeling from volcanic upheavals in what is now India, where the Deccan Traps spilled rivers of lava across the land, year after year, for what may have been hundreds of thousands of years. Toxic gases filled the skies, altering rainfall patterns, nudging the climate toward chaos. But it wasn't immediate. It wasn't apocalyptic, yet. The forests still grew, the insects still buzzed, the dinosaurs still lived, and above it all, eclipses still came. Even in the final million years of the Mesozoic, the rhythm of celestial mechanics continued, unaffected by lava, unbothered by biology. The moon passed between the Earth and Sun, casting long shadows over ecosystems teetering on the brink. Imagine one of those final eclipses. The morning begins as usual, the heat builds, insects thrum like tiny machines, herbivores shuffle through brush, their bodies caked in dust and pollen. Then, a hush. A sudden coolness. The sky begins to shift. Not cloudy, not stormy, but odd. The light dims slightly, then more. Shadows stretch unnaturally long. The wind slows. A predator, Tyrannosaurus rex perhaps, raises its snout to the air. Not fear, not confusion, but instinct. The sun shrinks, becomes a burning ring. And for several minutes, time seems to hesitate. The Cretaceous world pauses. From the beaches of Laramidia to the swamps of Mongolia, under feathered wings and frilled heads, the creatures look up, and the sky goes dark. Just another eclipse, and yet not quite. Because somewhere out in space, a rock the size of a city is screaming toward Earth. And it doesn't care about dominion or adaptation, or how long dinosaurs have ruled. It's not interested in evolution or feathers or frills. It's not even aware of the eclipse. But the Earth feels it coming. Let's freeze that moment. In the shadow of an eclipse, as the sun disappears and the stars emerge for a brief haunting breath, the stage is set. The world doesn't know it, but this is the last time dinosaurs will see the sky as they've always known it. This is the last eclipse of the Mesozoic. Soon the light will return. The sun will re-emerge from behind the moon, flooding the land with golden warmth. Creatures will return to their rhythms. Herbivores will graze. Predators will stalk. Life will continue. For a few more days, maybe a few weeks. And then it happens. The asteroid slams into the Yucatan Peninsula, carving a crater 180 kilometers wide. The heat is immediate, vaporizing rock, water, life. A flash of light bright enough to blind continents. Earthquakes ripple outward. Mega tsunamis rise like monsters from the deep. But that's just the beginning. Ash and sulfur fill the skies, blotting out the sun. For months. Photosynthesis halts, plants die, herbivores starve, predators follow, acid rain falls, the temperature plummets, wildfires rage across every forest that isn't already buried in choking ash. The Mesozoic ends not with a single roar, but a long, drawn-out silence. And yet, not everything dies. Some birds survive huddled in burrows, living off seeds. Some mammals endure, digging into the earth, eating insects, fungi, whatever they can find. But the towering dinosaurs, the raptors, the horned kings, gone. Their shadows remain in the fossil record, in the bones locked beneath ancient stone. And the eclipses? They don't stop. They continue long after the dinosaurs are gone. They fall over a healing earth, over fern-covered wastelands, over empty nests turned to dust. They fall over mammals emerging into the daylight for the first time. They fall over primates. And eventually, they fall over us. And as we gather in fields and on rooftops to watch the moon steal the sun, as we gaze upward through filters and glasses and lenses, we are staring into the same event that shaped the memory of dinosaurs. Not consciously, not culturally, but instinctively. In the hush of an eclipse, we share something with the Mesozoic. A moment, a pause, a shadow. And in that shadow, we remember. So, here we are. The final part. The last breath of a world that reigned for nearly 200 million years, now reduced to dust, bones, and whispers beneath our feet. The Mesozoic is over, but its echo still hums. If you listen closely, beyond the honk of traffic, beyond the flicker of screens, beyond the static of the modern world, you can almost feel it, the rumble of a distant herd, the beat of leathery wings over a prehistoric coast, the silence before an eclipse. And the thing is, the end wasn't really an end. It was a transition, one of the most violent, dramatic, and deeply consequential transitions in Earth's history. We've talked about the asteroid. We've painted the picture of fire, ash, night without end. But what came after? Let's step back into the light. Not the sunlight we know, but a new kind of light. A weaker, dust-choked glow filtering through a burnt orange sky. Imagine the Earth weeks after impact. Mountains blackened with soot, forests gone, oceans steaming with shockwaves, inland seas evaporating into vapor, the very soil poisoned with heavy metals. And yet, in a burrow beneath a fern-covered slope, a small creature stirs. A mammal. Nothing grand, nothing mythic. Maybe the size of a rat, with sharp senses, warm blood, and the kind of metabolism that doesn't need sunlight to function. It survives. One day becomes many, and the age of mammals begins. But this part isn't about mammals. Not really. It's about the echo the dinosaurs left behind. Because you see, they're not truly gone. Every time a bird flaps its wings, that's a dinosaur flying. Every time you hear a rooster crow, that's the ancient echo of a theropod's call, softened by evolution. Every time you watch a pigeon strut across the sidewalk like it owns the place, that's a creature with a 200 million year legacy of surviving predators, storms, volcanic winters, and yes, eclipses. Let's talk about that for a moment. Eclipses didn't stop just because the dinosaurs died. No, they kept going. Again and again and again. Thousands of them, falling across a healing Earth. Imagine one, maybe 100 years after the asteroid. The sky is still grey, but clearing. Ferns are spreading. New trees are rooting in ash-fertile soil. The Earth is rebuilding. And then the light begins to dim again. An eclipse. The moon, ever faithful, passes between Earth and Sun. The shadow falls, a different shadow now, over a changed Earth. And the creatures that look up? Not horned giants or long-necked titans, but small things, quiet things, the survivors. They feel the hush, they pause, they wait, and then the light returns. It always does, because eclipses don't end things. They remind us that endings are temporary, that light comes back, and that the world, though changed, keeps turning. Now, back to the Mesozoic's legacy. Let's not pretend dinosaurs were perfect. They were brutal, competitive, driven by instinct, but they were also elegant, intelligent, diverse, resilient. They filled every corner of Earth, from polar forests to tropical coasts. They climbed trees, they soared through clouds, they nested, they sang. Yes, they probably sang. Many dinosaurs had vocal chambers, resonating cavities, sound-producing adaptations. They might have filled the air with chirps, hoots, booms, rattles, screeches. The Mesozoic wasn't a quiet world. It was a symphony. And eclipses? They were the interludes, moments when the orchestra paused, the lights dimmed, and the Earth took a breath. Even today, the fossil record holds clues to this rhythm. Growth rings in bones, layers of ash, buried nests aligned with sun paths, sediment layers frozen in time. They're not just geology, they're memory. The bones of Triceratops don't just show us what they were, but how they lived. The feather imprints of Microraptor don't just prove it had wings, they whisper what the wind felt like against its skin. The footprint of a lone theropod in a Cretaceous mudflat doesn't just tell us where it walked, it tells us it was there, alive, moving, breathing, under a sky that changed and changed again, and then went dark. Let's take one last journey. You're standing in what will one day be Montana 66 million years ago. The ground beneath your feet is soft with mud. The trees sway. Yes, there are trees. The sky above is hazy, but light still cuts through. A young Ankylosaurus lumbers past, its armor glints, its eyes squint in the light. And then the eclipse begins. The light dims, slowly. The animal's still. The wind drops. Somewhere, a bird, yes, an actual bird, chirps once and then stops. Even the insects go quiet. The moon swallows the sun. Not forever, just for a moment. But in that moment, everything feels ancient, timeless, and then the light returns. Life resumes. You know what happens next, but this moment, this still strange moment, it's beautiful, bittersweet. A goodbye in slow motion, the final eclipse of an era. And now here we are, living on the same Earth, walking on continents shaped by those giants, breathing air filtered by the forests they once trampled, looking up at the same moon that once darkened their world. The Mesozoic is over, but its shadow is everywhere, in the wings of birds, in the bones of fossils, in the quiet moments during every eclipse, where the light fades, the Earth hushes, and, for a heartbeat, we remember. We're part of the same story. The same sun, the same shadow, the same world,